an undefeated assassin, betrayed and killed by his own master for being too dangerous. But death was not the end for him. He was reborn as the son of the strongest family on the continent. With a second chance and memories of his past life, he swears to take revenge on those who betrayed him. Will he succeed in fulfilling his vengeance in this new world? Without further ado, let's dive into the story. Under the full moon, its light barely piercing through the thick clouds, Raon, a genius assassin from the shadowy organization in Shadow, had dedicated his entire life to killing. But one day, he heard a chilling whisper. His death would come at the hands of his own master, Deus Robert. Returning from a mission, Raon reported his success to Robert. He was praised for his outstanding contributions to strengthening the family. Yet, in the middle of the conversation, Raon suddenly realized something. The indoctrination binding him had vanished. Indoctrination was a technique the Robert family used to control assassins from childhood. But Robert already knew. Shocked, Raon asked how his master had discovered this. With a cold smile, Robert revealed a horrifying truth. Aside from indoctrination, he had also implanted a rage worm inside Raon's body. This creature didn't just ensure complete obedience, it could also devour its host's heart if they ever dared to resist. Worse still, it could read emotions. With a snap of his fingers, Robert activated the rage worm. Instantly, Raon was overwhelmed by unbearable agony as his heart was consumed from within. After years of being shackled, he had finally felt a glimmer of hope thanks to the Ring of Fire technique, which had freed him from Robert's control. But in an instant, that hope was shattered. Knowing his end was near, Raon made a desperate attack against Robert, but failed. In a single swift motion, his head was severed. As his consciousness faded, Raon screamed in his heart, begging any god or devil to grant him another chance for revenge. Then, the impossible happened. Instead of perishing, Raon found himself reborn in the body of a young boy with golden hair. Even more shocking, his name was still Raon. At first, he thought it was just a dream. But as time passed, he began to accept the truth. He had been reborn into a wealthy family. Yet, unlike in his previous life, Raon wanted to learn more about his family. Unfortunately, as a mere baby, his actions were still severely limited. One day, while spending time with his mother, a servant suddenly rushed in, his face pale with panic. With a trembling voice, he announced that the lady's father was arriving at the mansion. Sylvie, Raon's mother, gasped. She quickly ordered the servants to prepare, but it was already too late. The man had already arrived, standing at the entrance with an air of undeniable authority. At that moment, Raon froze. His grandfather was none other than the ruler of the continent's strongest family, the destructive king of the north, Glenn Sieghart. In that instant, Raon realized the truth. He had been reborn into the mightiest family on the continent. Trying to ease the tension, Sylvie offered her father to hold his grandson. Expressionless, Glenn accepted, lifting Raon into his arms. With a calm voice, he said, "The name Raon carries meaning. Live in silence, without causing a stir, like a shadow." Night fell. Unable to sleep, Raon made up his mind. He would train in the Ring of Fire. To him, revenge against Deus Robert was no longer just a dream, it was his destiny. But as he began his training, he noticed something strange. The mana circuit in his body felt icy cold. At first, he considered breaking through the frost using the Ring of Fire. However, another thought crept into his mind. Wouldn't it be a waste to get rid of such powerful cold energy? A sudden idea struck him. What if he combined the flow of fire with the chilling energy within his body? Carefully, he attempted to merge both forces, rotating them in harmony. Slowly, he gained better control over his mana circuit. However, his infant body couldn't withstand the strain. Exhausted, he fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, while playing with his mother, a stranger arrived at the mansion. Raon recognized him immediately. He was the rugged saint, the greatest healer on the continent. The saint had come to examine Raon's condition. However, once the diagnosis was complete, his expression darkened. With a heavy voice, he declared that Raon was afflicted with a deadly curse of frost. This curse sealed his mana circuit with blocks of ice, hindering the flow of energy and greatly diminishing his chances of ever becoming a swordsman. Even worse, it also shortened his lifespan. If left untreated, Raon would die young. Sylvie's face turned pale. Then, unable to hold back her emotions, tears streamed down her cheeks. With a shaking voice, she cried out, "I'll do anything! Please save my child!" Throughout his previous life, Raon had never experienced a mother's love. But seeing her cry like that, his chest tightened. Without hesitation, Sylvie rushed to her father, who was still speaking with the saint. Desperately, she dropped to her knees before him. "Father, please, save Raon!" Yet Glenn remained unmoved. His face was cold, devoid of emotion. In a chilling voice, he replied, "It's useless. I will not help you." The only thing he could offer Raon was the Sieghart name. With that, Glenn dismissed Sylvie without hesitation. To him, there was nothing more to discuss. The saint who witnessed the event asked why Glenn didn't tell his daughter the truth, even though he was the one who ordered him to come and examine Raon's condition. Glenn remained silent for a moment, then changed the subject by asking the saint to explain Raon's condition to him. The saint explained that 9 of Raon's mana circuits were blocked by a curse, and it would become more dangerous as he aged. He also added that it was nearly impossible for Raon to become a swordsman in the future. Hearing this, Glenn remained calm and stated that it was not an issue as long as Raon could survive. 2 years passed. Thanks to his regular training and the elixirs provided by the saint for treatment, Raon finally reached the first stage of Ring of Fire. Time flew by. Raon was now 5 years old and had formed his second Ring of Fire. However, despite reaching this stage, the curse of frost and poor stamina still remained. Even so, Raon did not want to rush. He felt that he still had plenty of time to grow and continued his cultivation. Raon initially wanted to train again, but had to stop when his mother entered the room, reminding him to get ready. Today was the day they had to go to the Zeekhart family's main hall. Upon arrival, Raon and his mother immediately drew attention due to the bad rumors surrounding them. However, they ignored the whispers and continued forward. Not long after, the head of the family, Glenn Zeekhart, entered the room. Without saying much, he immediately drew his massive sword of judgment to begin the judgment ceremony. The purpose of this ceremony was to gather children from different family branches and measure their mana potential. The first child called was Burin Zeekhart, who possessed the wind attribute. Next was Runan Sullian, who had the ice attribute. Finally, the last name called was Raon Zeekhart. As he stepped forward, Raon immediately received contemptuous gazes from those around him. He had no high expectations because his body was still affected by the curse. When Raon placed his hand on the giant sword, he suddenly saw a flash of memories stored within it. In that vision, a blonde swordsman was seen battling numerous monsters. Shocked, Raon quickly regained his senses and saw that his mana attribute was incredibly small, not even reaching the halfway point. The people watching sneered and looked at him with mockery. Shortly after, Glenn ended the ceremony and ordered the attendees to leave. Even though Glenn had expected this outcome, he still felt disappointed by Raon's result. However, after the attendees had left the room, Raon's residual mana in the Sword of Judgment suddenly began to expand. The sword then radiated a golden light, resembling the sun, a phenomenon known as the Golden Flame. This phenomenon was extremely rare. In the entire history of the Zeekhart family, the Golden Flame had only appeared once before. 7 years passed since the Judgment Ceremony. Now, Raon was close to reaching the third stage of Ring of Fire and had turned 12 years old. That day, he returned to the main estate to attend the closing ceremony of the Judgment Ceremony. During the closing event, Glenn suddenly reminded Raon that he would be participating in basic training as a new member of the family. Hearing this, Raon looked confused. He was only being told now, while everyone else had known about it a month ago. When the announcement was made, Raon's mother suddenly opposed the decision, arguing that Raon was not yet fit to undergo basic training due to the frost curse in his body. Glenn, upon hearing this, seemed displeased and firmly stated that there were no exceptions or rejections for those who had received the Zeekhart name. Despite Sylvie's desperate pleas for more time, she realized that her efforts were futile now that Raon had inherited the family name. The onlookers sneered and mocked her with disdainful gazes. Seeing his mother being humiliated, Raon could not remain silent. He stepped forward and accepted Glenn's command to participate in Zeekhart's basic training. Observing his grandson's determination, Glenn decided to test him by exerting the pressure of someone who held the title, Destructive King of the North. Raon refused to back down and endured the crushing force to prove he was worthy of the Zeekhart name, though in the end, he lost consciousness due to the overwhelming pressure. The next day after the ceremony, Raon immediately resumed training in preparation for the upcoming training camp. Meanwhile, at the 5th training ground of the Zeekhart family, Glenn visited a red-haired man known as Sword of Light, Rimmer Diaz. Rimmer assumed that Glenn had come to ask him to go easy on Raon, just like Sylvie had previously requested. However, he was mistaken. Instead, Glenn ordered Rimmer not only to maintain the intensity of the training, but to increase it if necessary. Hearing Glenn's command, Rimmer became even more intrigued by Raon, despite how weak the boy was. On the other hand, Raon continued his preparations and finally reached the 3rd stage of Ring of Fire through consistent training, but this was merely the beginning. The training within the Zeekhart family was notoriously difficult, and achieving the 3rd stage of Ring of Fire was only the foundation. The night before the training camp began, Sylvie visited Raon's room. She wanted to talk to him, trying to persuade him to delay the training for a year out of concern for his well-being. However, Raon remained resolute in his decision. He wanted to prove himself to those who belittled both him and his mother. Seeing her son's unwavering determination, Sylvie finally decided to reveal the reason they lived alone and why they were despised by many. It all started when Sylvie fell in love and deliberately destroyed her mana circuit so she could leave the Zeekhart family. However, her happiness did not last long. A member of Eden recognized her face and launched a sudden attack on them. Raon's father, who was not particularly strong, and Sylvie, who was pregnant at the time, were unable to resist. By the time reinforcements arrived, it was too late. Raon's father had been killed in the assault. With nowhere else to go, Sylvie was forced to return to the Zeekhart family. That was why she was hated by so many. Upon hearing his mother's story, Raon felt that what she did was selfish, abandoning her duty to the family for the sake of personal happiness. But at the same time, she was also the one who gave him this new life and showered him with love. No matter how others labeled her as selfish, to Raon, Sylvie was still his one and only mother in this second life. Raon reassured Sylvie that he would be fine. After their conversation, he resumed training Ring of Fire, hoping to reach the intermediate stage. However, in the midst of his training, a sudden blue flame erupted before him, taking the form of a spirit. The being introduced itself as Wrath Spirit. The spirit demanded that Raon surrender his soul and body as an offering to exact revenge. Initially, Wrath Spirit seemed surprised that the one before him was merely a child. However, after peering deeper into Raon's heart, he realized that within this boy lay an unfathomable rage. Raon refused the spirit's offer, but Wrath Spirit was relentless. It attempted to provoke Raon's anger, forcing him to succumb. Fortunately, Raon managed to resist the temptation using Ring of Fire, the very technique he had trained so diligently. Not only did he withstand the spirit's influence, but to his surprise, he also gained a new ability, an authority belonging to Wrath Spirit called Status Window. It turned out that the system that had always appeared before Raon was actually created by the spirit itself. When Raon asked for further explanation, the spirit refused, claiming it had no reason to tell him more. Annoyed by the spirit's attitude, Raon told it to leave. However, instead of disappearing, the Wrath Spirit transformed into a bracelet that could appear at any time. The next day, at Zieghart's 5th training ground, a large crowd gathered for the Zieghart family's training selection. It wasn't just the main family's descendants, but also children from collateral families, recommended candidates, and those from subordinate families. As expected, as soon as Raon arrived, many people started whispering about him. Hearing their gossip, Raon directly confronted them, challenging them to say it to his face. Feeling provoked, some of the kids grabbed Raon's clothes as if trying to start a fight. However, before things escalated, Buren Zieghart stepped in and stopped them. But rather than helping, Buren only added fuel to the fire by provoking Raon further. Raon tried to remain calm, but in the end, he responded to Buren's provocation. Just as a fight was about to break out, Rimmer suddenly appeared and put an end to it. The training event officially began. Rimmer explained that, out of the 160 participants, only a quarter would advance to the next stage. This announcement shocked many of the children, as it meant the majority of them would be eliminated. Ignoring their protests, Rimmer immediately ordered everyone to start running. The children took off, with Buren and Runan leading the pack. Meanwhile, Raon lagged behind at the very back. Seeing this, many began to mock Raon, convinced he wouldn't be able to compete. However, to Rimmer, Raon was actually quite fascinating. He had the ability to see a person's potential through the color of their aura, yet strangely, he couldn't see any color from Raon, as if his potential was beyond comprehension. Meanwhile, Raon continued running tirelessly. To him, this kind of training was far too easy compared to what he had endured in his previous life. Raon's persistence started to confuse many onlookers, even Rimmer himself, who was surprised that Raon hadn't run out of stamina yet. Buren, observing Raon still running, decided to use his aura to increase his speed. However, Raon merely glanced at him with a blank expression, considering his actions childish. To him, they shouldn't be competing against each other, as the essence of this training was self-development, not just a race. Despite his growing fatigue, Raon kept running. Thanks to the progression of his Ring of Fire, he could replenish his stamina. The Wrath Spirit, noticing Raon's exhaustion, attempted to take over his body. Raon fought hard against the intrusion until, just before he was about to faint, the running selection concluded. Though it was extremely tough, his efforts paid off with an increase in his stats. Earlier, Rimmer had stated that children failing this test would be eliminated. However, it turned out to be a lie to test their perseverance. Nonetheless, Rimmer expected them to train earnestly. If not, he would genuinely eliminate those who slacked off. After providing this explanation, Rimmer immediately went to see Glenn to report on the training's progress. At the Zieghart training grounds, 3 children from collateral lines seemed displeased with Raon's success. One of them was Crane Zieghart. They accused Raon of using elixirs to boost his stamina and planned to teach him a lesson. Without any clear reason, they started bullying Raon. However, an annoyed Raon fought back until they were battered and unable to retaliate. At that moment, Raon asked them who had provoked them. Initially, he suspected Buren, but it turned out he had nothing to do with the incident. After uncovering the truth, Raon threatened the 3 children not to bother him again. Unbeknownst to them, Rimmer had been observing the incident from behind a tree. He was ready to intervene if the situation became dangerous, but what transpired surprised him. Raon reminded him of a young Glenn. Back at the dormitory, Raon conversed with the Wrath Spirit and made a bet. If Raon won, he would gain a +2 increase in stats and 1 random trait. However, if he lost, he would receive 10 rage points, making him more susceptible to being overtaken by the Wrath Spirit. Without hesitation, Raon accepted the bet, confident in his experience from his previous life. The next day in the afternoon after training, many children complained about the rigorous exercises. Raon, seeing them, remained indifferent and continued focusing on strengthening his body. Meanwhile, Renan was hiding behind a wall, secretly watching Raon as he trained. Raon, who was in the middle of training, was suddenly approached by Renan. Without hesitation, he asked her why she was there. Renan remained silent, not answering his question. Instead, she suddenly felt a refreshing scent and a calming atmosphere, which made her sit down next to him. From that moment on, Renan started following Raon wherever he went, even joining in on his training sessions. She felt her body become lighter whenever she inhaled Raon's refreshing scent. Meanwhile, Raon grew more uncomfortable with Runan's actions and asked her again if she had something to say to him. Runan simply replied, "No." So Raon decided to ignore her, while Runan continued following him for a little while longer. Meanwhile, Burn silently observed the two of them, noticing how often they were together lately. The other kids also didn't like how close Raon and Runan had become. Burn believed that Raon's physical training was pointless. No matter how hard he tried, their abilities were simply on different levels. Instead of wasting time, Burn focused on improving his swordsmanship. He then urged the other kids to concentrate on their upcoming test, rather than paying attention to Raon and Runan. One day, while Raon and Runan were training, someone suddenly approached them. It was Dorian. He asked if he could join their training because he wanted to learn the proper way to build his physique. Without hesitation, Raon replied that he didn't mind at all. Dorian then offered Raon some cookies, but Raon refused. However, Runan kept staring at the cookies with a longing expression, as if she wanted them badly. Seeing this, Raon eventually handed the cookies to Runan, who immediately ate them. From then on, they continued their daily training routine, and 6 months quickly passed. Throughout these months, Raon trained tirelessly, putting his life on the line despite his poor condition. Time flew by, and soon the morning of the exam arrived. This time, the Guardians were also present to witness the event. Meanwhile, the Wrath Spirit reminded Raon about their previous bet. Of course, Raon hadn't forgotten. He remained confident since no one knew how things would turn out. On the other hand, Dorian was crouched on the ground, overwhelmed by nerves. Runan, however, casually offered Raon a cookie. In the audience, Raon's mother cheered for him with great excitement. She felt proud of how much he had grown over the past 6 months at the training grounds. Shortly after, the head of the family entered the exam arena to oversee the event personally. Without further delay, Rimmer announced the details of the exam. The challenge was to withstand the pressure he would unleash. The Guardians immediately voiced their objections, arguing that it was unfair. However, Rimmer explained that this pressure was formed through various achievements. It was proof of one's abilities, even without using aura. The head of the family then stepped in and stated that Rimmer wasn't wrong. He affirmed that a person could develop immense pressure based on how they trained. With that, the exam officially began. Runan was the first to take the test. Rimmer unleashed a level of pressure that a child who had followed all the training sessions should be able to endure. To pass, the participant had to move forward and touch Rimmer. Anyone who used aura to resist the pressure would be immediately disqualified. Runan stepped forward, enduring the crushing force. With determination, she slowly advanced until she finally managed to touch Rimmer. She had passed. Next was Dorian. He struggled immensely and even vomited afterward, but he too managed to succeed. Then came Burn's turn. The pressure from Rimmer weighed down on him, making it incredibly difficult to move. However, he suddenly recalled his father's expectations. Burn couldn't afford to fail. If he did, he might be discarded just like his older brother. Fueled by desperation, he pushed forward with all his might and eventually passed. Afterward, Rimmer gave Burn some advice. He should stop trying to act like an adult and instead focus on training at a pace suitable for his age. Finally, the last participant to take the exam was Raon. Unlike the others, Rimmer unleashed an even greater pressure on him. However, Raon didn't waver in the slightest. As a regressor, he wasn't just Raon Zeekhart. Within him also existed the assassin Raon. Because of that, such pressure was nothing to him. He slowly advanced, effortlessly pushing through the overwhelming force until he reached Rimmer. Then, with a calm expression, he asked if he had passed. Both Rimmer and the head of the family were stunned. They couldn't believe that Raon had not only endured the pressure, but had completely broken through it. The audience too was left in shock, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Rimmer, losing his composure, immediately asked Raon who he really was. Without hesitation, Raon simply responded that Rimmer had seen his training over the past 6 months. However, Rimmer refused to accept that answer. He argued that Raon's performance had far exceeded what could be achieved in just 6 months of training. He also added that the pressure he had used should have been impossible to break through. But then, realizing that they were still in the middle of an exam, Rimmer quickly changed the subject to lighten the mood. Without further delay, Rimmer officially announced Raon as the best participant. Upon hearing this, Raon's mother and her servant were overwhelmed with joy, even shedding tears of happiness. Meanwhile, the audience murmured in confusion, questioning how Raon had managed to outperform everyone else. On the other hand, Burn couldn't accept the result. He immediately protested, claiming that Raon must have used some kind of trick. He also questioned how someone like Raon, who carried a curse, could possibly be declared the best participant. Fueled by frustration, Burn suggested settling the matter with a duel to determine who truly deserved the title. Rimmer then asked Burn if he really wanted to be the top participant. Embarrassed, Burn hesitated and said that wasn't the point. But since the exam was already over, he wanted a fair way to prove himself. Seeing this, Rimmer turned to the head of the family, asking for his decision. The head of the family then turned to Raon and asked if he was willing to fight Burn. Raon firmly refused. The test was already over, and the results had been announced. There was no reason to duel Burn. However, the head of the family then revealed a new incentive. The winner of the duel would receive a bronze tablet, which could be exchanged for a reward. The tablet system had 3 tiers: gold, silver, and bronze. each offering different prizes. More importantly, these tablets were awarded directly by the head of the family. Hearing this, Raon reconsidered. The rewards seemed worthwhile, so he agreed to the duel. Thus, the bare-handed duel began. Burn charged forward, launching an attack at Raon. However, Raon effortlessly dodged and blocked his strikes. Frustrated, Burn then unleashed a technique called Void Tiger Fish, an advanced move passed down by his father. But even then, Raon remained unfazed. He blocked every single one of Burn's attacks with ease. Meanwhile, Burn was fighting under immense mental pressure. He feared losing, knowing that failure could lead to being abandoned by his father. He had to prove himself. He had to win. On the other hand, Raon could see through all of Burn's movements, reading every incoming strike. Then, at the perfect moment, Raon intercepted Burn's punch with his own, not just blocking it, but replicating Burn's own technique. Burn took a direct hit. The audience gasped in shock. Raon had copied Burn's technique on the spot. Dazed and in disbelief, Burn asked how Raon could possibly use the same move as him. With a calm expression, Raon simply replied, "I just copied it. After all, you showed it to me." The audience couldn't believe their eyes. What they had just witnessed was something they considered impossible. Rimmer, however, saw it differently. He believed that Raon possessed a talent so extraordinary that it could place him at the very top of the continent. He decided to name this ability Heavenly Talent. Since Burn could no longer stand, Rimmer officially declared Raon as the winner of the duel. Raon's mother rushed into the arena, embracing him tightly. Overwhelmed with pride, she couldn't hold back her emotions. The same was true for Renan's parents, who watched with admiration. Meanwhile, Burn's father showed no such reaction. Instead, he coldly ignored Burn, feeling humiliated by his son's defeat. That night, in the Burn family's residence, Burn was summoned by his father and harshly scolded. Afterward, still filled with frustration, Burn wandered outside aimlessly. Before he knew it, he had arrived at the training hall. Unable to shake off his irritation, he stepped inside and checked the locker that Raon had been using. What he saw shocked him. Inside, there was a pile of worn-out shoes, each pair a testament to countless hours of training. In that moment, Burn realized the truth. Raon had been training relentlessly, while he himself had done the exact opposite. Confronted with the weight of his own inadequacy, Burn left the training hall in silence. Elsewhere, the Wrath Spirit was in disbelief. He had lost his bet with Raon and couldn't comprehend how it had happened. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. But Raon ignored him, focusing instead on what he had gained from their bet. +2 ability points, +1 random special trait, and +1 unique trait, Perception of the Snowflower. The Perception of the Snowflower trait enhanced his sensory range. However, since it was only at 1-star level, the effect was limited to a 10% increase. Raon smirked and mocked the Wrath Spirit for giving such a ridiculous name to the trait. The next day, Raon was summoned by the head of the family. As promised, he was given the bronze tablet. With it, he had the right to request a reward, either an item or a favor, depending on the tablet's value. Without hesitation, Raon immediately asked how he could restore his mother's status and return her to her former position. The head of the family answered, "The only way is to achieve something that earns the recognition of the entire family." But such an accomplishment was not easy. In fact, it was akin to plucking a star from the sky, nearly impossible. Yet, Raon's response was unwavering. If the head of the family says it's possible, then it can be done. With that, Raon considered the bronze tablet used and turned to leave. However, the head of the family stopped him. "That was just a question. You haven't actually claimed your reward yet. If all you wanted was an answer, I could have given it to you without using the bronze tablet." Without hesitation, Raon made his real request, a cultivation technique far superior to the one taught in training. Raon needed a more advanced technique. If he wanted to restore his mother's honor and exact his revenge, his current skills simply weren't enough. The head of the family snapped his fingers. At that moment, one of the Zekart family's bookshelves appeared before them. "Raise your hand," he instructed. "The book you desire the most will reveal itself to you." Raon did as he was told. A single ancient book emerged. The head of the family and the servant beside him were stunned. How could it be that book? Before anyone could react, the contents of the book flowed directly into Raon's mind and body. The head of the family stood still, lost in thought. He recalled his past, how he had focused solely on strengthening the family, neglecting his own son in the process. For the first time, regret filled his heart. Even if Raon hated him, he had now made up his mind. He would protect Raon and his mother, no matter what. Snapping out of his thoughts, he looked at Raon and asked, "What just happened?" Raon, still processing the new information, replied, "I don't know. I just remember a lost cultivation technique, and now it's inside me." The head of the family took a deep breath and asked, "What is the name of the book?" Raon's eyes flickered as he spoke. "It's called 10,000 Flames Cultivation." Raon was asked by the head of the family whether he truly remembered the contents of the 10,000 Flames Cultivation book. Without hesitation, Raon confirmed that he did. The head of the family immediately sat down and said that was enough. Raon was free to leave. After Raon left, a servant asked the head of the family about the cultivation technique Raon had mentioned. The head of the family explained that it was a technique that had only ever been used by the very first head of the Zekart family. He admitted that he never expected Raon to be able to learn it. The servant then asked about the book, which had gone missing. The head of the family reassured him, saying there was no need to worry. It had been passed down by someone else. Besides, no one else could use that cultivation technique. If not for Raon, the book would have just rotted away on the shelf. After returning home, Raon couldn't help but wonder why the head of the family had given him such a powerful cultivation technique. He felt that even a gold tablet wasn't enough to deserve such a reward. He tried using the technique, but no matter how hard he tried, he kept failing. Seeing Raon struggling, Wrath Spirit suddenly encouraged him to keep going. However, he also warned Raon to be extra careful while cultivating. If someone were to touch him during the process, it could cause serious problems, even paralysis. Raon immediately understood Wrath Spirit's real motive. He just wanted an excuse to disturb him while he was cultivating. Wrath Spirit even asked for permission to do it just once, but Raon firmly refused. Later, as Raon looked out the window, he spotted a servant by the lake. That servant wasn't just any ordinary servant. He was a spy, secretly gathering information on Raon. As soon as the spy let his report float away on the water, Raon swiftly pressed a knife against his neck. He ordered the servant to look at the lake and coldly stated that he had known about the spying ever since the servant first entered his residence. The servant was completely shocked. He had been so careful, yet Raon had seen through him all along. Without hesitation, Raon ordered him to open his mouth and forced a mysterious pill down his throat. Almost immediately, the servant felt a sharp pain in his stomach. Raon then picked up the report and demanded to know how it could be read. He took a few guesses and, to the servant's horror, got it right. The servant asked how Raon knew, but Raon ignored him and continued making guesses, this time about who the letter was intended for. Once again, he got it right. The servant panicked. He had spent years training as a spy, yet Raon seemed to know everything. As realization dawned, the servant suddenly suspected that the pill Raon had given him was Rageworm. Hearing this, Raon decided to play along and went along with the deception. The servant had assumed this mission would be an easy one, but he never expected to encounter someone like Raon. Desperate, the servant tried to negotiate, offering to rewrite the contents of the report, but Raon refused. He simply ordered the servant to write exactly what he had seen, though only the parts that his boss would inevitably find out anyway. Then, Raon made an unexpected offer. He asked the servant to become a double agent. With no other choice, the servant accepted. Satisfied, Raon walked away, hoping that the spy would provide valuable information when they met again. Not long after, training resumed. Despite everything, Raon still hadn't managed to use aura. When he arrived at the training grounds, he saw that only 42 people had made it through, barely a quarter of the original participants. Suddenly, Runan approached him. A few days ago, at the Runan estate, she had been told to always express gratitude to those who helped her, and so, without hesitation, she thanked Raon. Raon found the whole thing strange. It wasn't like Runan to act so suddenly. Then, Dorian came over and asked how Raon was doing. He was already struggling during the initial selection process, and now, as an official trainee, he felt like he was going to die for real. Dorian kept complaining about everything that had happened to him, even mentioning how Burn wasn't the top trainee, but to his shock, Burn was standing right behind him. Startled, Dorian froze, while Burn ignored him and walked straight up to Raon. Without hesitation, Burn apologized for his behavior during training. He admitted his defeat, but made it clear that he hadn't given up. No matter how much effort it took, he was determined to stand before Raon again. Burn had made up his mind. He would never back down or surrender. Raon found it odd that someone his age could openly acknowledge both his mistakes and his loss. Just then, Rimmer arrived and announced the details of their new training program. But before he could continue, someone suddenly appeared, drawing everyone's attention. It was a woman, Martha Zekart. Without wasting any time, Martha asked who the training leader was and told them to step forward. She declared that she couldn't stand the idea of being under someone weaker than her, and immediately challenged them to a fight. Raon stepped up and introduced himself as the top trainee. Martha scoffed, unimpressed. He didn't look like someone worthy of that title. Without hesitation, she challenged him to a fight. Burn immediately intervened. "Where's your pride, Martha?" he asked. Martha turned to him, furious that he had dared to speak to her that way. Burn remained calm, explaining that Raon had rightfully earned his position as the top trainee, but Martha dismissed his words with a sneer and mocked him instead. Despite her provocation, Burn didn't let his emotions get the better of him. Then, Runan appeared, stepping in to shield Raon from Martha. Martha turned and walked away, but it was just a feint. In an instant, she lunged at Raon, launching a sudden attack. However, Raon reacted swiftly, deflecting her strike with ease. Martha's eyes widened in shock. Her attack had been redirected. Without missing a beat, Raon counterattacked, but Martha managed to block his strike. Frustrated, Martha grew even angrier and prepared to attack again. But before she could, Rimmer stepped in and stopped her. "Raon hasn't learned to use aura yet," Rimmer stated. "I can't let you fight him, but once he does, I'll allow the battle to happen." Wrath Spirit fumed. He was frustrated that Raon had let Martha off so easily and urged him to retaliate with full force. But Raon remained calm. "Now's not the right time," he replied. "Besides, my strike landed. Next time I'll show her something even more impressive." The scene then shifted to the training grounds. Burin was struggling with the intense training, realizing that it wasn't as easy as he had expected. Meanwhile, Raon, despite only training for a month, had been improving at an astonishing rate. Martha, unwilling to be left behind, trained even harder. Known for her terrifying talent, she now found herself feeling uneasy. So much so that she couldn't even hide it from Raon. When she returned home, her anxious expression was obvious. A servant reassured her, saying there was no need to worry. Raon won't be able to defeat you, he said. He has a flaw that can't be overcome. Meanwhile, Raon continued training relentlessly. Having learned about Raon's weakness, Martha regained her confidence. Smirking, she began mocking him. The servant had informed her that Raon had incredibly low mana sensitivity and still hadn't learned aura, so she had nothing to be concerned about. Instead, she found it laughable. Runan, seeing Martha taunting Raon, immediately stepped in and drove her away. After the training session ended, Raon reflected on how enjoyable his training had been. Back when he was an assassin, the only thing he ever developed was his assassination skills. Wrath Spirit, on the other hand, was furious again. "You just stood there and let her insult you?" he raged. But before Raon could respond, Runan suddenly approached him. Without a word, she handed him something. Curious, Raon took a bite. The moment the food touched his tongue, both he and Wrath Spirit were stunned. It was delicious. They immediately wanted more. Runan, in her usual calm manner, simply stated, "It's marble ice cream," and then walked away without another word. Raon called out to Runan, hoping to get another taste of the food, but she ignored him and continued walking away. After a week of training, Raon finally returned home. As soon as he arrived, he received a report from the servant. He also asked about the current situation at his residence. The servant informed him that his boss's interest in Raon's mother had started to fade, and it seemed like the servant would soon be summoned back. The servant then asked if Raon was deliberately avoiding learning aura. Raon simply replied, "Who knows? Maybe." Hearing this, the servant left without another word. Wrath Spirit, still curious, questioned Raon about why he was struggling to grasp aura, but Raon himself wasn't sure. Despite his difficulties, he was determined to keep training, even though Wrath Spirit suggested that he should just get some rest instead. Raon opened his window, only to find Rimmer waiting outside. It turned out that Rimmer had come to give him guidance. Without explanation, Rimmer led Raon to a certain place, and Raon had no choice but to follow. As they climbed higher, Raon grumbled, wondering why they had to hike when Rimmer was supposed to be teaching him about attributes. From the moment Rimmer first saw Raon and witnessed his training methods, he couldn't shake the impression that Raon was like an intense fiery blaze, so strong that it resembled magma. Eventually, Rimmer stopped in the middle of the forest. Raon asked why they had halted there, but instead of answering, Rimmer unleashed his attribute, wind. He explained that, as an elf, he had been able to feel the wind ever since he was born. His lifelong desire was to wield a sword imbued with wind so powerful that it could cut through anything, and now he had finally achieved it. Rimmer urged Raon to find his own path and develop the fire he wanted to master. After that, they made their way to another location, arriving at the workshop of a craftsman. The craftsman eyed Raon suspiciously and asked Rimmer who he had brought along. Rimmer introduced Raon as the grandson of the family head, stating his name clearly, but the craftsman simply shrugged, saying he was already retired, unless, of course, the family head himself came to see him in person. However, Raon wasn't paying attention to the conversation. His focus was entirely on the fire he could feel in the workshop. He had seen many flames before, but this one was different. It was exactly the kind of fire he had been searching for. The craftsman finally introduced himself as Valkan. Hearing this, Raon was immediately taken aback. He knew that name well. Valkan was a world-renowned craftsman, famed for his extraordinary skill. Still in disbelief, Raon asked if he was truly the Valkan, the very man who had forged the sword wielded by the family head. When Valkan confirmed it, Raon quickly bowed out of respect. Rimmer, however, casually reintroduced Valkan to Raon, despite Raon already knowing exactly who he was. Then, Rimmer requested Valkan's help in igniting a fire so that Raon could experience it firsthand. Valkan, uninterested, simply told them to go to the blacksmith's forge instead. But then, Rimmer dropped an unexpected piece of information. Raon was Sylvia's son. Valkan's expression shifted in surprise. At that moment, Raon made a direct request. He asked Valkan to let him feel the flames. Valkan remained silent, staring at Raon for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. He explained that he was in the middle of crafting golden charcoal, a special material capable of producing flames far stronger than ordinary coal. He had dedicated the past 10 years solely to this project. Valkan made it clear that he didn't care about Raon. As long as Raon didn't interfere with his work, he had no objections. Raon bowed and expressed his gratitude. Meanwhile, Rimmer and Valkan stepped outside to chat, leaving Raon alone in the forge, completely immersed in the fire before him. Raon had spent 7 months trying to understand fire, sitting in front of the furnace owned by the blacksmith Valkan. All this time, he kept visualizing the kind of fire he wanted to create. Suddenly, Raon remembered his grudge against Darius. He also remembered his desire to reverse his mother's fate. That's why the fire he envisioned was like a torch, one that could light the path forward, a fire that could be used as a weapon to defeat beasts, snow, and rain. It had to be a fire that never died out. Then, a stronger energy than usual flowed into Raon's body, forcing him to focus even harder to contain it. Just as he began to see the image in his mind clearly, the Wrath Spirit suddenly appeared inside his consciousness. Turns out, this was the moment the Wrath Spirit had been waiting for. It launched a direct attack on Raon, making him feel like his body was shattering into pieces and leaving him gasping for air. Raon desperately searched for a way to survive, but his consciousness started to fade. The Wrath Spirit mocked him, saying everything Raon had done was pointless, and that his body and soul now belonged to him. But Raon refused to give up. He fought back. He tried to absorb the natural mana heated by the furnace. The mana inside that furnace was far hotter and more powerful than ordinary fire, strong enough to devour everything. Seeing this, the Wrath Spirit began to panic and asked what Raon was doing. Raon answered, "I'm trying to survive." He was trying to directly absorb the surrounding energy. The fire in Valkan's furnace flared up dramatically, causing the blacksmith to turn toward Raon in alarm. Strangely, despite the heat, Valkan felt a chill near Raon. Concerned, he asked Raon if he was okay, noticing that he was shivering intensely. Just then, Rimmer appeared and told the blacksmith to leave Raon alone and not to touch him. At first, the blacksmith hesitated, but after Rimmer explained that Raon was in a spiritual state where even the slightest touch could cause him to cough up blood or die instantly, Valkan asked whether the cold aura Rimmer mentioned was really inside Raon's body, and if there was truly nothing they could do. Rimmer confirmed it was too dangerous to interfere and silently prayed that Raon wouldn't die. Meanwhile, Raon continued his struggle against the Wrath Spirit. The spirit told him to give up. There was no hope. But Raon wouldn't surrender. He had died once before, powerless. This time, he was determined to make sure it wouldn't happen again. The fire in the furnace kept growing stronger, to the point that the furnace itself could no longer contain the sudden surge in heat. Rimmer realized that Raon was absorbing mana directly from the furnace, as he sensed it gathering at a single point. Driven by determination, Raon finally reached the flame he had been searching for. A massive explosion erupted from the furnace. Rimmer panicked and asked if Raon was okay. To his relief, Raon was still standing, now cloaked in golden flames. Having survived the ordeal, Raon's stats increased after acquiring the 10,000 Flames technique. He felt confident that he could soon master it even further. Raon was amazed at all the blessings he had just received. Meanwhile, the Wrath Spirit was left speechless, shocked by how mentally strong Raon was, even after being pushed to the brink. Raon calmly said, "I told you, trying to break me is pointless." From that point on, Raon decided to stay alert and guard against the Wrath Spirit, working to cover any of his own weaknesses, so that the spirit couldn't exploit them again. Afterward, the blacksmith approached and asked if Raon was all right. Raon replied that he was fine. The blacksmith then asked if Raon had successfully obtained an aura. Raon confirmed that he had, and it was all thanks to the blacksmith. He also apologized for destroying the furnace during the process. The craftsman said it was no problem as long as Raon was okay. Besides, he could always make another furnace. Then the craftsman glanced over at his furnace and felt something was off, so he went to check it out. To his surprise, there was golden charcoal inside. This charcoal was stronger than white charcoal and lasted longer than black charcoal. Thanks to Raon, the craftsman had finally created the charcoal he had been dreaming of for decades. He thanked Raon, but Raon replied that he didn't do anything special. The craftsman then explained that while Raon was training, the fire in the furnace always flared intensely, and that was because of Raon's breath. The heat from the furnace had spread throughout the room, allowing the craftsman to finally produce the golden charcoal, all thanks to Raon. After explaining this, he asked Raon what his goal was and what kind of swordsman he wanted to become. With full confidence, Raon answered that he wanted to become a swordsman who never gives up, no matter the situation or the opponent. The craftsman said he didn't expect such an answer from a kid like Raon. He also told Raon that he'd be able to get his sword in about 3 to 5 years. Once Raon's resolve was fully set, the craftsman told him to come find him, because he would keep the golden charcoal just for Raon. Raon asked if that meant the craftsman would make a sword for him. Wasn't he already retired? The craftsman then said he would come out of retirement just to make Raon's sword in the future. He also told Raon to stay alive. Watching from above, Rimmer grew curious about what was going on. It turned out that Raon had successfully awakened his aura. Rimmer commented that Raon sure had a knack for making people worry. Apparently, the head of the family had been coming every day to check on Raon, concerned about his progress. Now that Raon had finally awakened his aura, the family could breathe a sigh of relief. The scene then shifts to the training ground. Runan was wondering when Raon would return. She also wanted to repay him for helping her before. Moments later, Raon appeared at the training hall entrance, and Runan immediately approached him. She encouraged Raon and handed him a marble ice cream, the same kind she had given him before. Runan noticed that Raon's aura now carried a colder, fresher, and stronger energy than before. Raon thanked her and took a bite of the ice cream. The Wrath Spirit was thrilled. It tasted amazing, and it had been ages since he last had one. He begged Raon to eat the rest, but Raon told Runan he'd only have one. Runan then asked if Raon was feeling better. He smiled and said he was. The next day, Rimmer gathered everyone and announced a special plan for the upcoming month. In 1 month, he would be holding one-on-one duels. The outcome of these battles would affect each student's graduation and determine their rankings. Martha then raised her hand and asked what would happen to students who had fallen behind and hadn't awakened their aura yet. Rimmer casually replied that every student had already awakened their aura. Martha was a bit shocked and asked when that happened. Rimmer responded that it was probably yesterday or today. He wasn't exactly sure. Martha immediately realized he was talking about Raon, as she turned to him and said that now she finally had the chance to fight him. She'd been dying of boredom from waiting too long. Martha then began provoking Raon, but he stayed silent, unfazed by her taunts. Burin arrived to stop her, but instead of backing down, Martha doubled down, comparing Raon to Burin and the other trainees. She then told Raon that he had been at the top for too long, and now it was time for him to give up that position. Martha proposed a wager. Whoever won their duel would take the top trainee spot. But Raon refused. There was nothing in it for him if all he did was risk his title. Hearing that made Martha laugh. She said Raon didn't understand his situation. He had no one backing him up. Raon responded by asking if she was scared. That only made Martha laugh harder, and she changed the terms of the bet. If Raon won, she would give him the 9 Flowers Elixir, a rare potion known to enhance both physical and mental strength. Finally, Raon agreed to the wager. A month passed, and it was time for Martha to seek her revenge. That duel would be her first rematch since the day she lost, her first ever defeat. The one-on-one sparring event was about to begin. Rimmer told the trainees to watch the fights carefully and think about how they'd handle similar situations. The first match was Burin versus Dorian. Before the match began, Dorian raised his hand. He wanted to forfeit due to not feeling well, but Rimmer told him to at least give it a shot. There was always something to learn, even in defeat. The match started, and Burin quickly secured an easy win. The next fight was Raon versus Crane. As soon as it began, Crane rushed forward to attack, but Raon blocked his strikes flawlessly, knocking his sword from his hands and winning the match with ease. Several other matches followed, and then it was time for the final fight. Raon versus Martha. Their battle was intense. Martha launched a relentless offense while Raon skillfully defended and counterattacked. Eventually, Martha unleashed her aura and resumed her assault. But Raon still held his ground, then struck back. Then came Raon's turn to release his aura. Martha was stunned. The flames weren't ordinary. She could sense they were dangerous. Realizing that, Martha got serious. They clashed once again, exchanging blows at full force. Their swords collided with such power that the ground cracked beneath them and strong winds burst out, blinding the spectators. Once the dust settled, everyone could see it. Martha had lost, her sword shattered. No one could believe it. Raon, who had only awakened his aura a month ago, had defeated Martha so completely. We then shift to the family head's residence. Rimmer reported to the head that Raon had beaten Martha. Even Rimmer was stunned. Martha had been training her aura for 4 years, yet she still lost so decisively to Raon. The family head told Rimmer to guide Raon carefully so he wouldn't grow overconfident. He then asked about Martha's condition. Rimmer said she was in shock, though her physical wounds were fully treated. But the real issue was psychological. This was her first official loss, and the emotional blow was deep. Next, we see Raon planting flowers. Wrath Spirit was grumbling, telling him to do it properly. That night, after Raon defeated Martha, his stats had increased once again. His Ring of Fire had reached 4 stars, and his water resistance had improved as well. Just as Raon finished planning, Martha showed up. Raon immediately asked what she wanted. Martha had come to challenge him again. Raon called her pathetic for not accepting her loss. But Martha said it wasn't that. She just couldn't understand why she lost. Raon then demanded the item she owed him from their previous bet. Since Raon refused her new challenge, Martha threatened to stomp on the flowers in his yard, saying she never expected Raon to be into gardening. Raon replied that he didn't actually like flowers. He was doing it for his mother. After that, Martha was about to head home, but suddenly Raon's mother appeared and asked who the friend with him was. She immediately recognized Martha because of her black hair and black eyes. Raon's mother seemed worried, likely because she had heard about their recent duel. She asked Martha why she had come. Martha replied that she just wanted to say something to Raon, and now that it was done, she was planning to leave. But Raon's mother gently grabbed Martha's hand and invited her to come inside for a meal. At first, Martha tried to refuse, but Raon's mother insisted, leaving Martha with no choice but to agree. Raon's mother prepared a delicious meal and began chatting with her during dinner. As Martha watched her, memories of her own mother came flooding back. After finishing the meal, Martha quietly left the house. On her way back, she kept thinking about how Raon's mother reminded her of her own, and that was why she couldn't bring herself to turn down the invitation. Ever since her mother was kidnapped, Martha had promised herself never to lose again, not until she could reunite with her. But now she had lost to Raon, and feared she might be cast out of her family. However, when she arrived home, she was surprised to receive a letter from her father. In it, he congratulated her on her first defeat and informed her that he was still searching for her mother. Martha went to her room, picked up a knife, and cut her hair short. She vowed to become stronger, to start over from scratch, and to finally let go of the pain from her past. The trainees suddenly noticed something strange about Martha. She wasn't acting like her usual self, and on top of that, she had even cut her hair. Martha then approached Raon. She told him that she intended to keep the promise they had made before, that the loser would have to follow the winner's orders. After saying that, Martha left, leaving Raon surprised that she was actually willing to listen to him. However, this change in Martha's attitude only applied to Raon, the one who had defeated her. The new year arrived. Although only small changes had occurred, no one expected Martha to continue obeying Raon even after the year turned. After that, Byrne became calmer and took on more responsibility as the coordinator of the trainees. Meanwhile, Renan's sword became sharper and more refined. As for Raon, he continued risking his life through intense training every day. It had become a part of his routine. Soon, the trainees began to feel even more astonished by Raon. He had managed to master a newly taught technique in less than half a day. Rimmer later reported Raon's achievement to the head of the family. In response, the head of the family informed Rimmer that they would soon be receiving important guests, a delegation from the Owen Kingdom set to arrive in just a few days. The Owen Kingdom was one of the 6 major kingdoms located in the heart of the continent. They were one of Sieghart's key allies and a kingdom that placed great value on the sword and martial arts. Hearing this, Rimmer immediately asked who would be leading the delegation. The head of the family explained that while Duke Tartan was the official representative, the third prince would also be attending. Since the third prince was close in age to Raon and the trainees, the head of the family instructed Rimmer to properly train the trainees in preparation. Rimmer asked if the delegation would actually visit their training ground. The head of the family confirmed it, saying that the guests specifically requested to observe the swordsmen and trainees in action, meaning there could be no embarrassing performances. Hearing that, Rimmer began plotting something. Returning to the training grounds, Rimmer announced to the trainees that they would soon be facing off against the prospective knights of the Owen Kingdom. It turned out that Rimmer had personally visited the prince and invited him to their training ground, rather than letting him visit the other training centers. Rimmer confidently declared that he would show the prince what real swordsmen looked like. Not long after, the knights of the Owen Kingdom arrived, with the prince naturally becoming the center of attention. The prince introduced himself as Greer de Owen. Raon immediately sensed that the prince was strong, unusually so for someone of his age. Among all the knights, Greer stood out the most. Rimmer then asked Raon if he wanted to fight the prince. Without hesitation, Raon answered flatly that he did. Raon also thought it was the perfect opportunity to put his newly learned technique to the test. Since Raon agreed to fight, the others had no choice but to follow suit, and thus a series of 20 matches was arranged. Rimmer instructed everyone to follow Raon's lead in choosing who would fight, and even revealed that he had placed a personal bet with the Owen Kingdom. His entire month's salary was on the line. He threatened the trainees, telling them not to lose. Raon then finished selecting the participants and ordered them to gather information on their opponents before the matches began. Raon also offered a few words of motivation to the other trainees as the leader of their group. He believed the first match would be crucial for boosting everyone's morale, so he chose Martha to fight first. Martha agreed without hesitation and immediately stepped into the dueling arena. Her opponent was a man much taller than she was. He introduced himself as Tars. Despite the clear difference in size, Martha remained confident that she would win. The duel between Martha and Tars began. Watching from the sidelines, the prince thought to himself that Raon's training ground was full of talented individuals, unlike the other training camps he had seen. Meanwhile, the Duke asked Rimmer if the reason he had invited them here was to show off his students. Rimmer responded that this was a rare opportunity for the trainees to face knights from one of the 6 great kingdoms, and he believed it would be a valuable learning experience. Then, Rimmer casually suggested that they place a bet and reward the winners. However, the Duke seemed to look down on Rimmer's trainees and asked if they even stood a chance against the knights of the Owen Kingdom. Rimmer simply replied that he believed in the students he had trained. Returning to the duel, Martha kept attacking relentlessly until Tars's sword finally broke. Tars couldn't believe how strong Martha was. With one final strike, Martha sealed her victory. Raon, observing from the side, was surprised. Instead of becoming softer after their previous battle, Martha's swordsmanship had grown faster and stronger. The matches continued until the 18th duel, where Renan faced off against Idalia. Idalia openly said that she didn't like Runan's blank expression and immediately unleashed her aura. Runan calmly replied that she didn't like fire, and then released her own aura. Their duel began, and their clash created a mist that spread across the arena. Runan used the mist to move stealthily. Idalia sensed Runan's presence and tried to strike, but there was nothing there, leading her to wonder if it had all been an illusion. Suddenly, Runan appeared behind her, sword pointed at her back, and claimed victory in the 18th match. Idalia admitted it had been a great fight, but Runan ignored her and instead walked straight to Raon, asking if he had been watching her duel. Raon replied that her footwork had improved significantly compared to before. Runan thanked him and quietly sat down next to him. Next was the 19th duel, featuring Byrne against Saren. After briefly introducing themselves, they immediately launched into battle. Byrne quickly realized that their skills were very close, meaning that even a slight lapse could cost him the match. The fight was fierce and intense, and eventually both of their swords shattered, resulting in a draw. Byrne stepped down from the arena, frustrated that he couldn't win. However, Raon encouraged him, saying he had done a good job and not to worry, because Raon would win the final match and uphold Sieghart's honor. Raon then entered the arena alongside the prince. The prince quickly sensed that Raon's martial arts skills seemed ordinary and asked Raon if he was a direct descendant of the Zeekhart family. Raon answered honestly, he was not. Hearing that, the prince completely underestimated Raon, losing interest in the fight. He didn't like predictable matches and was far more eager to fight Martha, Runan, or Burin instead. The prince even suggested to Rimmer that after he defeated Raon, he should be allowed to challenge either Martha or Runan. Rimmer simply smiled and said it was fine, as long as he won. The arrogant prince then ordered Martha and Runan to prepare, boasting that he would quickly finish his duel with Raon. He also mentioned he wouldn't even bother using his aura to conserve his strength. Meanwhile, the Duke asked Rimmer who that monster was, referring to Raon, because he had barely been able to sense Raon's presence. Rimmer smiled and said, "So you noticed," and added that maybe the Duke should have warned the prince, who was clearly underestimating Raon. The Duke explained that the prince was destined to one day lead the Owen kingdom and had never experienced defeat before. He believed that this would be a perfect opportunity to teach the prince about losing in a safe environment. Even so, he emphasized, the prince was strong. Even genius swordsmen couldn't defeat him. Rimmer disagreed with that statement and proposed another bet. Whoever lost would treat the other to a drink. The bet was simple. Raon would win within 5 strikes or less. The duel began. Raon immediately closed the distance and attacked. With just a single strike, Raon defeated the prince, leaving the Duke in utter shock. It didn't even take 5 strikes. Raon crushed the arrogant prince in one clean blow. At that moment, the prince realized there was a reason Raon had been saved for the final match. He finally understood. Raon wasn't just talented. He was a true genius. The Duke turned to Rimmer and said, amazed, "He's still just a trainee. How are his footwork and swordsmanship already so perfect?" Rimmer smiled and replied, "That's why I told you, Raon would win." As Raon prepared to leave the arena, the prince called out, insisting that it wasn't over yet. He argued that he hadn't shown his true skills, that if he had fought seriously from the beginning, he could have won. At that moment, Martha interrupted, bluntly telling the prince to accept his loss instead of whining like a spoiled dog. She added that she had tried to be polite, but since he had lost, he should just leave quietly. Delia quickly scolded Martha, telling her to be more respectful toward the prince. But Martha fired back, saying, "He's royalty, and I'm a direct descendant of the Zeekhart family. Why should I show him any special respect?" Before the argument could escalate further, Rimmer stepped in to calm everyone down and said they should first hear what Raon had to say. Raon spoke clearly. "There's no reason to continue. The duel is over, and the bet has been decided." Hearing that, the prince finally shouted out that he accepted his defeat and admitted he had misjudged and underestimated Raon. He also confessed that he felt ashamed, but pleaded for one more duel, a serious one, so he wouldn't regret it for the rest of his life. The prince even bowed his head and earnestly begged Raon for another match. Raon hadn't expected the prince to apologize so sincerely. He had thought the prince was nothing more than an arrogant noble. Moved by the prince's humility, Raon agreed to a rematch. One final time. The second duel began. This time, the prince fought with everything he had. And Raon too finally revealed more of his true power. The prince launched the first attack, unleashing a flurry of strikes. Yet Raon calmly defended against every blow without giving an inch. The prince then prepared to unleash a secret technique passed down only to the successors of the Owen royal family. Raon stood ready to receive the attack and encouraged the prince to come at him. He activated the Ring of Fire to strengthen his defense, surprising the prince with the appearance of a golden flame aura. The prince charged forward, and the clash of their swords echoed through the arena. For a moment, it seemed the prince had the upper hand. He managed to push through Raon's aura and saw an opening. But in the next instant, the prince's sword shattered. Raon immediately counterattacked, landing a decisive blow and securing victory once again. Thus, the second duel also ended in Raon's overwhelming win. The prince then thanked Raon and reached out for a handshake, grateful for everything he had learned. He openly admitted his defeat. Raon shook his hand and replied that he too had learned a lot from their duel. The prince asked Raon how old he was, and Raon answered that he was 14. Realizing he had lost to someone younger than himself, the prince smiled bitterly. Then, he handed Raon a special token, a symbol that Greer de Owen, the third prince of the Owen kingdom, would grant any request made by the bearer. Raon asked why he was being given such a valuable item. The prince explained that, even though he lost, he felt relieved. He had realized something far more important through their fight. With that, the prince turned and left, and Raon also took his leave. Later, the prince reported everything that had happened to the head of the Owen household. He told him he wished to return immediately to put into practice everything he had learned. On the way back, the Duke asked why the prince had revealed the Owen royal family's secret technique. The Duke thought it was excessive and something that should have been kept hidden. The prince agreed that he had gone too far, but the Duke wasn't done. He pointed out that the prince had also handed over a royal relic to Raon. The prince explained that it was simply a token of gratitude for Raon agreeing to a rematch. Besides, Raon had shown techniques worth paying attention to. The prince saw the relic as an investment, believing that Raon might one day become the strongest in the kingdom. The prince hoped to build a friendship with him, and couldn't help but wonder just how powerful Raon would become the next time they met. Meanwhile, back at the training grounds, the other trainees congratulated Raon on his overwhelming victory. Among them, the head of the Zeekhart household's butler looked on happily, proud to see his grandson recognized by a foreign prince. He rarely saw the head of the household smile, and even less often with such warmth. The head, however, brushed it off, muttering that the old butler must be imagining things. At the same time, the Duke of Owen had delivered some serious news to the Zeekhart household. It seemed the 5 demons had started to move. The scene shifted back to the training grounds. Rimmer gathered the trainees and praised them for their efforts. He then announced that next week, they would undergo special training, real combat practice. He warned them to be prepared to shed blood. Apparently, in the southern region of Zeekhart, a group of mountain bandits calling themselves the Snow Tiger Claw had been causing trouble. Originally, they survived by collecting taxes from travelers passing through the mountains, but recently, they had grown more violent, stealing from merchants and even killing civilians. The trainees' original mission had been to wipe them out. However, it had now changed. They were tasked with tracking down the bandits and eliminating them because the group had attacked a village, slaughtered its people, and burned it to the ground. Rimmer warned everyone not to let their guard down. These bandits were once well-known aura users. Their departure to the southern region was set for tomorrow afternoon. After the meeting, Raon stayed behind to continue training for the upcoming mission. But no matter how hard she tried, she felt she wasn't making any progress. She thought about asking Raon for advice, but decided against it, not wanting to bother him. After finishing her practice, Raon headed home. On the way, someone called out to her. It was her older brother, Syria. The moment she heard his voice, Raon froze, visibly terrified. She couldn't even speak in front of him. Syria told her bluntly that she was forbidden from participating in any battles or dangerous duels. Hearing those words made Raon stumble backward, trembling. It turned out that Raon had a deep trauma from her past. When she was little, she had seen Syria kill her beloved pet squirrel right in front of her. Now, he repeated the same act in front of her, bringing those painful memories flooding back. Raon's trauma resurfaced violently. Syria leaned in close and whispered that she must not risk her life before the selection day, because in his eyes, Raon belonged to him. At that moment, Raon arrived, stepping in to protect the terrified Raon. He stood between them and demanded to know who Syria was. Raon asked the man in front of him who he was. The man replied that Raon should introduce himself first before asking about others. Raon responded that the man had no right to block someone's way in a narrow alley. He even suspected the man might be a thief or a robber. The man chuckled and said Raon could think whatever he liked, but he wasn't some criminal. He was actually Raon's older brother. Still unsure, Raon asked if he was really Raon's brother, since Raon looked so scared. The man admitted it had been a long time since they last met, and perhaps he had overstepped and frightened her. Raon then pointed out that Raon's brother had killed a squirrel with his bare hands. How could he treat that like a joke? Raon's brother explained that the squirrel was just a toy, and even showed his hands to prove there was nothing wrong. But Raon suspected he had simply wiped away any traces of blood using aura. Raon's brother went on, saying he had only come to give his little sister some snacks. He also complimented Raon on picking good friends and hoped they would stay close in the future. With that, he apologized for his behavior and left. As it turned out, Raon already knew who Raon's brother was. He was a genius swordsman, one of the 12 future stars of the continent. He came from the Sulian family, and his name was Syria Sulian, also known as the Azure Sword. Before Raon's regression, he had only heard Syria's name. This was the first time they actually met. Raon wondered silently whether Syria was just cruel or merely pretending to be a hero, because he reminded Raon of Darius. Afterward, Raon reached out his hand to help Raon to her feet, offering to escort her. When they arrived at the carriage, Raon thanked Raon for accompanying her. Raon told her to get plenty of rest, as they would be leaving the next day. Back home, Raon became even more withdrawn. Her brother's return had brought back painful memories. Syria had always acted this way, believing it was the best way to protect Raon from getting hurt. When she was young, Raon was injured by her pet squirrel. In response, Syria killed the squirrel. Later, whenever Raon spoke about it to others, those people would end up getting hurt too. Because of that, Raon chose to stay silent, believing it was the only way to avoid anyone else getting hurt. At first, she thought she was the only one suffering and alone, but after meeting Raon, she realized they were quite alike. Watching how hard Raon worked to change how others saw him, Raon began to believe she could change too. They were both trying to transform themselves, but right now, Raon felt that change was impossible for her, and decided that maybe it was okay if she stayed the same. For now, she just had to endure. The next day, the trainees and Rimmer arrived in the southern region. Rimmer told the group to rest first before starting their mission. Meanwhile, Raon thanked the Wrath Spirit. If it weren't for him, Raon wouldn't have noticed Raon's brother hiding his presence, and he wouldn't have made it in time to help Raon that night. The Wrath Spirit then urged Raon to give him control of his body so he could take revenge on Raon's brother. He even promised to return Raon's body once he was done, all because Raon had given him his new favorite treat, marble ice cream. Of course, Raon refused, even though the Wrath Spirit seemed serious about it. Raon explained that killing Raon's brother would be pointless. The damage had already been done. No matter what happened to her brother now, it wouldn't erase the trauma Raon had suffered. Raon was the first person who genuinely cared for Raon, and because of that, Raon made a silent vow. He would personally destroy anyone who ever hurt Raon, whether in this life or the one before. 2 days passed since they arrived in the southern region. Eventually, they reached a village that had been attacked by the Snow Tiger Claw group. There were charred corpses of villagers everywhere. Martha didn't flinch. She was already used to scenes like this. Raon, however, looked around, wondering where Raon was. He hadn't seen her. It turned out Raon had wandered into one of the villagers' homes and stumbled upon a corpse. The sight overwhelmed her, and she fought the urge to vomit. Rimmer gathered all the trainees and explained that everything they had just witnessed was the work of the Snow Tiger group. He told them to burn this sight into their hearts and never forget it, so that when they faced Snow Tiger, they wouldn't hesitate for even a second. Rimmer then handed out special whistles. Normal people wouldn't be able to hear the sound. Only those with trained senses could. If anyone found themselves in danger, they were to blow the whistle immediately, and Rimmer would come running. However, he also warned them. Snow Tiger's swords showed no mercy. So, rather than relying solely on the whistle, they should try to handle the situation themselves first. Afterward, the trainees were ordered to form groups. Meanwhile, Raon was still haunted by her brother's words, how he had promised to kill anyone who dared hurt her. As she stood there lost in thought, Raon approached and asked if she wanted to team up. Raon agreed, and they set off together. As they moved, Raon began analyzing the possible whereabouts of the Snow Tiger group. Following his instincts, he led Raon toward a nearby hill. The Wrath Spirit reappeared, teasing Raon about how much he seemed to worry about Raon. Yet, he never actually talked to her about it. Raon admitted he didn't know what to say. After all, he wasn't even sure how he felt about his own mother. How could he possibly give advice to someone else about family matters? The only thing Raon was certain of was how terribly Raon's brother had treated her. At the top of the hill, they discovered a hidden forest, just as Raon had predicted. The enemy's tracks had been carefully concealed, enough to fool the average person, but not Raon. His experience as an assassin before his regression made him far more perceptive. Raon told Raon that they were close to the enemy's base. From now on, she needed to stay completely silent and just follow his lead. The path itself was clear of traps, except for one at the entrance to the enemy's base. Peeking into the camp, they spotted the Snow Tiger members, along with a hostage, a young child. Raon carefully assessed the situation. His decision was clear. They had to save the child. He asked Raon to help by using her mana to muffle any sounds during the rescue. Raon stepped forward and activated her mana, creating a sound barrier. Meanwhile, Raon rushed in and swiftly took down the two bandits in front of him. But when Raon saw the bandits killed, her trauma resurfaced. She dropped to her knees, screaming, and the mana she was using to suppress sound shattered. Frozen by fear, Raon became an easy target. One of the bandits moved in to strike her, but Raon quickly intervened, saving her just in time. He subdued the bandit and demanded answers. Resigned to his fate, the bandit spilled everything he knew. It turned out there was another hostage inside the cave, the sibling of the child Raon had just rescued. Hearing this, Raon declared that she would save the other hostage, telling the child not to worry. But Raon warned her, "It's not that easy. Don't make promises you can't keep." Right after, Raon blew the special whistle Rimmer had given them. However, the sound was picked up by someone inside the cave, and more enemies emerged. Without hesitation, Raon threatened the new group, offering a trade. "Release the hostage, or your men die." The enemy leader just laughed and threatened to kill the young girl instead. Seeing the situation escalate, Raon quietly told Raon to turn away. Then, without mercy, he struck down the bandit holding the girl hostage and launched an attack on the rest. Raon quickly joined in, using her abilities to disrupt the enemy's senses. Together, they managed to rescue both hostages and retreat from the immediate danger. Afterward, Raon instructed Raon to stay and protect the children while he finished off the remaining bandits. But Raon grabbed his arm, pleading with him not to go, worried because Raon was still injured. Raon calmly explained, "Yes, the battlefield is terrifying, but what's even more terrifying is being paralyzed by fear and unable to act. We are swordsmen of the Zekart family. It's our duty to carry on the legacy of those who came before us and protect those who remain." He continued, "I don't know exactly what your brother did to you, but the more you let fear control you, the larger that shadow grows. You can't spend your whole life running from it. Only you can protect yourself and the people you love." Raon then added, "From now on, your choices are your own. You don't have to hide in the shadows anymore." Moved by Raon's words, Raon gathered her courage. She refused to stay shackled by her past any longer. Meanwhile, Raon returned to the fight, cutting down many of the remaining bandits. Suddenly, the bandit leader attacked him. Raon narrowly dodged and countered with a powerful strike, killing him instantly. The other bandits stared in shock, wondering how a kid could be this strong. Just as Raon was about to declare the battle over, he was ambushed again. It turned out the one he had killed wasn't the real leader. The true leader now revealed himself. Unlike the others, he was a skilled swordsman, forcing Raon into a tougher fight. At the same time, Raon was being cornered by another group of bandits. Raon's focus wavered, worried for her safety. Raon, still haunted by her brother's shadow, froze. But then she heard Raon shout to her, "You can protect them! Don't be afraid!" Those words broke through her fear. Runan gathered her strength and defeated the bandits threatening her. With Runan safe, Raon could finally focus. He unleashed his aura and used a devastating technique, completely overwhelming the real bandit leader. With the battle over, Raon checked the bandits' loot, and among the treasures he found a rare elixir, the two-tone flower. Suddenly a man appeared and asked if they were the ones who had killed the bandits. Raon calmly answered, "Yes, we did. Why do you ask?" The man introduced himself as Rictor. Hearing that name triggered Raon's memory. He remembered Rictor as a renowned martial artist, known for his extraordinary skills. Rictor was famous for joining the North and South Alliance using only his sword, and for leading a large group of bandits in the mountains for over a decade. Rictor then guessed that Raon and Runan were Sighart trainees, noting the lack of a family crest on their swords. He began to consider whether he should kill them. As he unleashed his killing intent, Raon, who had once lived as an assassin, remained unfazed. Even though Raon knew he couldn't defeat Rictor with his current skills, for some reason, he felt no urge to back down. Drawing his sword, Raon stood his ground and challenged Rictor to attack. Raon knew that if Rictor unsheathed his blade, it would likely mean death. But he wasn't afraid to die. Seeing Raon's fearless stance, Rictor decided he had no desire to fight him. He said he would regret killing someone like Raon now. Rictor added that even if he were to seize the elixir Raon carried, he would end up dead anyway, because the fierce wind that had been watching them would not let him leave alive. With that, Rictor turned to leave, asking Raon for his name before going. He said he would wait for the day he would hear Raon's name echo across the mountains, Terukan, and the Rabel River. Afterward, Raon and Runan returned to the children and safely made their way back to Martha Village. Burin was once again frustrated that he had fallen behind Raon. Meanwhile, Rimmer was busy giving advice to the other trainees. After their mission, Raon and Runan were summoned by the family head. Both were awarded bronze medals for their achievements. The family head even praised them, and much to Raon's surprise, he returned the elixir Raon had obtained during the mission. After the ceremony, Raon went home, where he found Dorian waiting for him. Raon immediately panicked. Dorian had already told his mother everything. Soon, Raon's mother appeared and asked him if what she heard was true. Raon was speechless. She walked up to him, pulled him into a tight hug, and said, "You did a great job, Raon." Raon was stunned. He had expected her to scold him, since she had always warned him to be careful. But instead, his mother explained, "The first head of the family swung his sword to protect the weak. Why would I scold you for doing the same? For saving those hostages?" In fact, she was proud of him. Raon, unfamiliar with such overwhelming emotions, struggled to process it all. When he turned around, he realized Dorian had already slipped away. The Wrath Spirit appeared, teasing, "Finally noticed, huh? That kid ran off a long time ago." That night, Raon thought to himself, this wasn't such a bad night after all. Meanwhile, Runan had gained newfound confidence, successfully overcoming her trauma thanks to Raon's words during their mission. And as it turned out, Rimmer had been secretly observing Raon's encounter with Rictor the whole time. The fierce wind Rictor spoke of, it was Rimmer himself watching over them. After everything that happened during the mission, Rimmer began to believe that Raon resembled the first head of the Sighart family and considered him a promising seed for a future king. Meanwhile, at the Robert family residence, Darius was busy writing something. He glanced down at a wound on his hand, a wound that still hadn't healed. It was the same wound he had received from Raon, the assassin, 17 years ago. Despite using countless elixirs, consulting expert doctors, and even renowned priests, nothing had been able to heal it. The wound neither festered nor closed. Instead, it remained, as if forcing Darius to constantly remember his true self. Darius wondered if the spirits of the dead were compelling him to remember them. But unfortunately, Darius was not the type to dwell on the past. He simply didn't have time to waste before realizing his ambitions. Elsewhere, Raon had achieved the rank of sword expert. His stats had risen along with his advancement. Reaching this level hadn't been easy. He had fought tooth and nail for it. The Wrath Spirit emerged and sneered, saying that even sword masters were nothing but insects to him, let alone mere sword experts. So, Raon shouldn't be so proud. Raon replied that becoming a sword expert at just 15 years old was incredibly rare, and it would be hard to find anyone else like him across the continent. The Wrath Spirit scoffed, saying only fools cared about age on the battlefield. Weakness was weakness, no matter how old you were. Raon agreed, admitting that no one would show mercy just because he was young. The Wrath Spirit added that even now, Raon's strength was no match for just one of his claws, but hearing that made Raon chuckle. In the past, the Wrath Spirit wouldn't even have bothered mentioning something like a claw. To Raon, this was a small acknowledgement of his growth, even if the Wrath Spirit angrily denied it. Raon teased him, saying it was obvious the spirit had recognized his progress. Infuriated, the Wrath Spirit insisted he would never acknowledge a mere human, but Raon continued to poke fun at him. The scene then shifts to the training ground. Rimmer called out to everyone, telling them to stop for the day. Their training was over. Burin protested, asking for an extra 20 minutes to make up for Rimmer's tardiness, but Rimmer ignored him and immediately ran off. Raon took over, instructing everyone to finish up their exercises and asking the assigned team to start cleaning the training hall. Meanwhile, Dorian was opening his locker when he suddenly screamed. Martha was standing right next to him. She ordered the others to clear out, saying she would handle the cleaning herself. Just then, Rimmer returned, remembering something he had forgotten to announce. He informed them that they had received their second mission. It had been 6 months since their first mission, and this time, they were being sent to Cebu Village, in the southeastern territory of Zeekhart, to eliminate the orcs threatening the villagers. In short, it was an orc subjugation mission. Everyone was excited. They had been waiting for a mission like this. However, Rimmer revealed that he wouldn't be accompanying them. Byrne asked what they should do if they encountered serious danger. Rimmer simply said that dealing with such situations was part of the test. Even knowing when to retreat and survive was a skill, and the leader's judgment would be critical. He added that they would depart in 2 days at dawn. The announcement stunned everyone. Only 2 days to prepare. Rimmer explained that an extermination mission required much more urgency and focus compared to escort or dungeon exploration missions, so they had to be ready. Byrne complained about the lack of preparation time, but Raon immediately stepped up, calming everyone by reminding them that missions could come at any time, without warning. Now wasn't the time to panic. It was time to prepare. Hearing Raon's words helped steady the others' nerves. Meanwhile, Rimmer gave one final warning. Orcs were far more savage and powerful. Even their sheer size alone was unlike any monster they had faced before. He advised them to focus on dodging, rather than trying to endure hits, because facing orcs head-on would be far too dangerous for them right now. Especially since they would be outnumbered, the battles would be chaotic and overwhelming. The next day, Raon was getting ready to set out on his mission. The Wrath Spirit warned him that unexpected things could happen at any time, so Raon shouldn't assume everything would go according to plan. Just then, Raon's mother suddenly entered his room, surprising him. She looked upset, furious even, because Raon hadn't informed her beforehand. Raon asked how she had found out. He figured it must have been Dorian who told her, but it turned out it was Rimmer who had informed her. Raon quickly apologized. His mother then told him that being the top member wasn't just about receiving honors, it was a position of responsibility. He had to lead the others in a better direction. It wasn't enough to simply complete the mission. He had to guide his teammates and minimize any losses. The lives of the others would depend on Raon's decisions. She reminded him that while subjugating monsters might sound easy, it was actually a difficult mission. They had to completely eliminate the enemy to ensure no villagers would be harmed. She warned Raon to always remember, he wasn't just a trainee anymore. He was a swordsman of Zeekhart. Raon thought his mother might scold him, and she truly was angry, but she held it back, knowing this wasn't the right time for it. Even though she was deeply worried for him, departure time arrived. Rimmer addressed everyone, reminding them that anything could happen out there. He warned them not to trust anything too easily, and if things ever felt overwhelming, they shouldn't hesitate. Just retreat immediately. Without wasting more time, Rimmer ordered them to move out. Normally, the journey would have taken about a month, but since the roads had been cleared, they would now reach their destination in just 2 weeks. Raon took charge, commanding the group to form 4 lines and move according to their assigned squads. It wasn't just Raon's physical strength and aura that stood out, his mental fortitude and keen perception were also something to be proud of. Because of that, Rimmer believed Raon and the others would handle this mission well. But in truth, Rimmer had lied to the trainees. He had said he wouldn't accompany them, but he actually planned to secretly follow and watch over them from the shadows. Meanwhile, a suspicious group, looking very much like assassins, was also gathering, and they too were heading toward the same village Raon and his group were traveling to. On their journey to a village called Cebu, Raon and his group run into members from the 6th training ground. The 6th squad is led by someone named Kane Zeekhart. Raon asks why the 6th squad members are there, and in return, Kane asks why the 5th squad is there as well. Raon had heard about Kane before. He was once injured and bedridden for a long time, but now it seems Kane has recovered enough to rejoin the 6th training squad. With his skills, Kane could easily be considered a high-level swordsman. Kane then explains that they're heading to Cebu Village for an orc extermination mission. He asks Raon what business his squad has there. Raon replies that they're on the same mission, to eliminate the orcs in Cebu. Kane then questions whether both squads were given the same mission, as the 6th squad wasn't informed about this. Raon is a bit surprised by this too, since he also wasn't told that another squad would be involved. We're then taken to the night before the departure, at a bar on the outskirts of the city. There, Rimmer is proudly talking about his students from the 5th training ground. He boasts how they completed their previous mission by defeating a group of bandits and confidently believes they'll succeed in this orc extermination mission as well. Suddenly, the instructor of the 6th squad approaches Rimmer and suggests that the orc mission should be handed over entirely to the 6th squad instead. He argues that orc extermination requires teamwork, not just individual strength, something the 5th squad lacks due to its focus on individual skill. Recently, the 6th squad completed an extremely difficult training course without losing a single member, so their teamwork has improved. Because of that, he insists the mission should go to them. Rimmer responds, "Are you really that concerned about the 5th squad getting all the attention lately?" He then proposes a new idea. Send both the 5th and 6th squads together. The orcs need to be dealt with before they become a serious threat to the village. By turning it into a shared mission and letting both squads compete, The job will get done faster and more thoroughly. Rimmer then asks the 6th Squad's instructor if he agrees. The instructor nods and says he'll request permission from the head of the family. Back to where the 2 squads are gathered. Burren speaks up, saying there might have been a misunderstanding between the instructors about this mission. He tells the 6th Squad they can go back. The 5th Squad alone is enough to handle the mission. Kane takes offense at Burren's remark, saying he's being arrogant just because he's from the 5th Training Squad. Is that confidence just because you're from the 5th Squad? Kane then argues that this mission requires teamwork, and the 6th Squad is clearly superior in that area. The 5th Squad lacks any real experience in group cooperation, so they're bound to struggle. Burren replies that while he acknowledges Kane's abilities, he shouldn't underestimate the 5th Squad. Watching the heated exchange between Kane and Burren, Raon starts to wonder if the instructors, especially Rimmer, had predicted this would happen. So, why didn't they say anything before sending them out? Rimmer values hands-on experience and considers it essential for a noble. From his perspective, a real-life monster extermination mission is invaluable. But most importantly, it's a chance for the students to learn teamwork and strategy, the true key to success in any monster hunt. Additionally, the 5th Squad still lacked experience in teamwork and strategy. That's probably why Rimmer intentionally set them up to compete with the 6th Squad, whose reputation was rising. He likely wanted them to realize for themselves that the 5th Squad still had a long way to go. Thinking about it that way, Raon found Rimmer to be incredibly cunning. And suddenly, everything made sense. It was clear that they were meant to experience firsthand just how important teamwork really is. With all that in mind, Raon recalled what his mother told him before he left. She said she wanted to see him become a swordsman who protects others. Snapping back to the present, Raon looked at Burren and Kane, who were still arguing. He stepped in and told them to calm down. Arguing any further would just be a waste of time. He pointed out that they should already know this problem couldn't be solved through words alone. So, Raon suggested settling things with a match between the 2 squads. Burren questioned the idea, asking if it was really okay to fight each other before the mission even began. It seemed reckless. They didn't even know what kind of threats they would face yet. Raon replied that one squad clearly wasn't willing to back down, and Burren himself had no intention of handing the mission over to the 6th Squad either. Raon then explained, since this was an extermination mission, the orcs would likely appear in large numbers, and that meant there was a high chance a high orc would be leading them. So here was the plan. Whichever squad wins the match would take the lead in the mission. The losing squad would play support. They'd work together to defeat the orc leader, break up the orc group, and complete the mission as planned. If the leading squad couldn't handle the orcs, the support squad would step in and take over. Kane agreed. It wasn't a bad idea. With that settled, the 2 squads headed up the nearby mountain to begin their match. And just like that, the battle started. Burren, Martha, and the other 5th Squad members charged toward the 6th Squad. The rules were simple: defeat the entire team or capture their flag. Martha, however, didn't think they needed a strategy. She believed brute force was enough, and underestimated the 6th Squad, thinking she could take them all down on her own. So, she charged straight in and began the fight. Meanwhile, Raon was sitting quietly in the back, using his skill, the legendary senses, allowing him to visualize the entire battlefield and predict how the fight would unfold. Runan, watching with him, asked if it was really okay to let everyone fight without a plan. Raon replied that they were all too confident and wouldn't listen to him anyway. Runan then asked if they still had a chance of winning. Raon calmly answered that he was certain their squad would lose, and lose badly. And he was right. During the battle, Martha and Burren struggled against the 6 squad members. One by one, they were defeated and forced to retreat back to Raon's position, completely crushed. Raon looked at them and asked, "Was it really as easy as you thought?" Judging by their condition, they were clearly ready to give up. They'd been defeated, but the world doesn't stop just because they're getting stronger. They couldn't afford to underestimate their opponents just because the Kingdom of Owen had ignored them in the past. Raon went on, saying their defeat was only natural. They fought without any strategy, without teamwork, and without taking the time to understand their enemies. On top of that, they wasted energy, aura, and even revealed their techniques too early. As swordsmen, they trained every single day. But just because the 5th Squad had shown better performance recently didn't mean they could look down on the 6th Squad. Runan then asked, "So, does that mean the 5th Squad is going to lose?" Raon answered, "We still have a chance." Hearing that, Burren and Martha were stunned, but they immediately declared that they were willing to do whatever it took to win. Seeing that the 5th Squad still had the will to fight, Raon finally began giving them instructions, showing them how they could still win. On the other side, after their victory in the previous battle, the members of the 6th Squad became even more confident. Some even started getting cocky. But there was still one member who reminded the others not to get arrogant, since the 5th Squad had once defeated a group of bandits. Besides, it was highly likely that the 5th Squad wouldn't give up so easily and would return soon. And sure enough, Martha suddenly appeared right in front of them, ready for a second round. Without wasting a word, Martha charged straight in. The 6th Squad quickly focused their aura to block her attack. But this time, Martha's strike landed cleanly, catching them completely off guard. At the same time, Burren was also attacking other members of the 6th Squad. Just like Martha, Burren's assault hit its mark. Surprised by the success of Byrne's attack, the 6th Squad noticed something strange. His movements had changed. Both Martha and Byrne were fighting in a completely different way compared to before. That raised a question in their minds. What made them change their fighting style so drastically? The battle continued, with Martha now leading the charge. As she fought, she began to realize Raon had been right. Earlier, Raon had asked his teammates why they lost the first match, even though they clearly had the advantage in both skill and power. Byrne had guessed, was it because of information and strategy? Raon confirmed he was right. Before the match, the 6th Squad had analyzed every member of the 5th Squad and came up with strategies to counter each of them individually. Meanwhile, the 5th Squad had simply assumed they could win with brute force and didn't prepare at all. As a result, they had to retreat without even getting the chance to fight properly against opponents they normally could have beaten. Raon also pointed out that the 6th Squad hadn't even burned through much of their stamina or aura yet, unlike the 5th Squad, who had wasted theirs. Yes, the 5th Squad was at a disadvantage now, but they weren't the only ones capable of using information and strategy. Hearing that, Byrne asked if Raon had a plan. Raon responded that Kane had already heightened his vision and awareness. Thanks to that, he could now observe all movements from a distance and deploy the right team members to counter any attack from the 5th Squad. In Kane's strategy, for someone like Martha, whose strength lies in raw power and endurance, but who uses fairly straightforward attacks, he would assign a swordsman who could block her strikes while draining her aura at the same time. Meanwhile, to counter Byrne, who fights with precise yet straightforward swordplay, Raon figured the best match would be someone skilled at reading attacks. That way, Byrne wouldn't be able to land any effective strikes. So, the best solution for the 5th Squad was to switch opponents. However, Raon knew the members of the 5th Squad wouldn't easily agree to that. So, he came up with a backup plan. He ordered everyone to change their fighting styles. Raon explained that while the stances of the 6th Squad were solid, especially the one fighting Martha, their aura flow was weak. That left small openings in their defense. Because of that, Raon told everyone to sharpen their senses, find those openings, and strike. After hearing this, Martha and Byrne were shocked. Wait, isn't Raon just standing quietly in the back? How is he explaining everything like he saw it all firsthand? Raon simply replied, Kane's instincts are impressive, but when it comes to instinct, mine are even sharper. Back to the battle. Everything was going according to plan. Even Renan didn't seem like she would lose. Then suddenly, Kane appeared at Raon's location. At that moment, Kane still couldn't sense anything unusual from Raon. With no other option, he decided to search for the 5th Squad's flag. Kane muttered, No wonder I lost control of the situation. Raon's already been giving orders to the rest of the squad. He also mentioned hearing rumors that Raon had a fire-attributed aura. Kane then released his aura. Seeing it, Raon was a bit surprised. They shared the same elemental attribute. Kane added that his aura level was higher than Raon's, and he had more of it too. In Kane's mind, that meant Raon was no match for him. Provoked, Raon unleashed his own aura, and just like that, their fight began. Raon struck first. As Kane analyzed the attack, he recalled the rumors. Raon had defeated both Martha and Prince Owen. Even though Raon's aura was supposedly inferior in level, its power was undeniable. Still, Kane believed he was stronger. Their sword clash continued for quite some time, but then, Raon's aura overwhelmed and consumed Kane's, completely catching him off guard. Raon followed up with another strike, and eventually, Kane was defeated. After winning, Raon calmly said, What's the point of having an elemental advantage if you still end up losing? Soon, all the 5th Squad members gathered around Raon, with Kane lying in defeat. Byrne asked, Did you plan for this all along? That Kane would come for the flag once he got desperate. Just like Raon had predicted, everything had gone smoothly in taking down the 6th Squad. Even Martha admitted it. She had initially planned to ignore Raon's orders, but because things worked out so well, she changed her mind. Once again, the entire 5th Squad acknowledged Raon as their number one. From now on, they would follow his every command without complaint. Hearing all of this, Raon felt genuinely happy. This battle had helped everyone grow, even if just a little. He then addressed the team with a few words. You all did a great job today. Raon also reminded them that this match had taught them an important lesson, how dangerous blind confidence and arrogance can be, and what kind of outcome you get when you act without a solid strategy. If this had been a real battle, all of us would have been dead. So don't forget what you learned today. On the other hand, Kane's perspective on Raon had changed. He now realized that Raon was far more capable than he initially thought, sharper, more composed, and refined both mentally and physically. At first, Kane assumed the 5th Squad was arrogant, but now he saw that the truly arrogant one was himself. Kane then approached Raon and admitted that he too had learned something. Thanks to Raon, Kane realized that letting his guard down was a mistake that should never happen, and having a backup plan was essential in case the original strategy failed. Kane still believed that the 6th Squad had better teamwork, especially since he had gathered some intel on the 5th Squad beforehand. But in the end, not only did the 6th Squad lose, Kane was also completely outclassed in both leadership and one-on-one combat against Raon. He used to think he was stronger, but it turned out to be nothing more than baseless pride. He had learned a lot from that match, and for that, Cain now felt indebted to Raon. Seeing this side of Cain, Raon started to think that Cain was different from the other direct bloodline descendants he had met before. Cain actually seemed like a decent person. Raon then said that the match had also been a valuable learning experience for him. Following that, Cain reminded him of their earlier agreement, that the 6th Squad would serve as support for the 5th Squad during the Orc extermination mission. We then skip ahead to 2 weeks after the mission had begun. Cebu Village was a small, unremarkable place, with no special products or tourist spots. It was home to just a handful of villagers who made a living through farming. Their mission this time was nothing more than a routine patrol. Occasionally, monsters would cross through Cebu Village, so this wasn't considered a special assignment. But Raon couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched from behind. Raon suspected it wasn't the instructors tailing them. This sensation felt different. It was as if an enemy was observing their strength, carefully assessing them from the shadows. Given the situation, Raon decided to stay alert while pretending to be unaware. Then, he called Burren over and said that for this mission, he wanted Burren to take command and issue the orders. Surprised, Burren asked why the sudden change. Raon explained that in their first mission, it had only been him and Renan who fought the Snow Tiger, so this time, it would be better for Burren to take the initiative. Besides, hadn't Burren once said on the first day of training that he wanted to fight alongside Raon again? Raon added, "You weren't just saying that, right? So now's your chance. Show the results of all your hard work." Hearing this, Burren was left speechless. In the end, he accepted Raon's request to take command for the current mission and promised to show how much he had grown. Raon then turned to the rest of the squad and told them to follow Burren's orders from now on, including Martha. Martha agreed, saying she'd follow Raon's instructions and listen to Burren, but only if they delivered actual results. Suddenly, the Wrath Spirit appeared, and Raon asked if it could sense someone nearby, watching them. The Wrath Spirit responded, noting that Raon had also sensed the presence of someone observing them. Raon then asked where that person was and how many there were, but the Wrath Spirit replied that it wouldn't reveal the location of him. The moment Raon heard the word him instead of them, he deduced that there was only one person watching them, not multiple enemies. Annoyed by how quickly Raon figured it out, the Wrath Spirit grew irritated. Meanwhile, Raon reminded himself not to jump to conclusions just yet. There was only one person watching them, but that didn't mean they were alone. There could be others hiding nearby. That's why he couldn't afford to let his guard down. We then cut to the group of mysterious figures observing Raon and his team. Just as Raon suspected, the observer wasn't alone. There were indeed others hidden away. Only one had been actively watching. The person sitting down turned to the scout and asked, "Who are the people staying in Cebu Village?" The observer replied that they seemed to be from Zeekhart. Judging by their movements, they weren't official knights, just novices on their second mission, likely since they weren't accompanied by an instructor. The seated figure then asked, "Are you sure they didn't notice you while you were spying?" The observer responded confidently, "Of course not. There's no way a bunch of rookies could sense my presence." Then the one sitting down remarked that perhaps the villagers, being unusually sensitive to changes, had asked for help due to the increasing orc activity. He also mentioned that they had expected to find the monostone quickly, but clearly it was going to take longer than anticipated. It turned out that these mysterious people had come to Cebu Village in search of a monostone, though its location remained unknown. The observer then suggested, "Should we just wipe them all out now? This is the perfect chance to eliminate some future Zeekhart talents." But the one in charge shook his head and said they should hold back for now. He proposed releasing a few monsters first, to avoid drawing suspicion. If they attacked directly, the Zeekharts might realize the Mana Stone was nearby. By sending monsters, they could make the Zeekhart trainees think their mission was complete and prompt them to leave the area. Once they were gone, the group would return and destroy Cebu Village, leaving nothing behind. Then the man who had been sitting calmly stood up, placed an orc mask over his face, and transformed into an orc-like creature. Night had fallen, and were taken to where Raon and his teammates are having dinner. Raon glances at Burren, thinking that although he was initially worried, Burren has performed far better than expected. Now, Burren no longer mentions the Zeekhart name with arrogance. He prioritizes the mission and has managed to calm both the village chief and the residents. It's clear that Burren is trying to show a new side of himself. But Burren isn't the one Raon is truly worried about. Burren and the other trainees can handle the monsters without Raon's help. What matters now is the strange presence Raon has been sensing ever since they arrived in Cebu Village. Although it was faint, the moment they entered the village, Raon felt something vanish into the mountains. He couldn't tell whether it was part of the Zeekhart family's test, or someone plotting something from the shadows. Because of that, Raon decides to look into it the next day. The next morning, Burren and the trainees head into the forest to hunt monsters. While there, Burren notices something odd. The village chief explains that monsters usually appear every winter, but this season, their numbers have tripled. That's why Cebu Village couldn't deal with it alone and requested help. So far, over 100 monsters have been confirmed. If they include those not yet seen, the number could be more than 200. Additionally, none of the trainees are familiar with the forest terrain, so the village chief assigns a guide to lead them through the mountains. The guide is the fastest young man in the village. His name is Kanbar. Kanbar, however, seems anxious and doesn't fully trust the Zeekhart group. Seeing his worry, Raon tells him not to be afraid and assures him that he'll return without a scratch. After that, Burn gives a briefing to the group, explaining that orcs are stronger than other monsters in terms of raw combat power. Meanwhile, goblins and kobolds use poison, so even the smallest wound could be fatal if they're not careful. He warns everyone to stay sharp. Burn then orders the 6th squad to form a defensive line to prevent the monsters from escaping. He raises his voice telling everyone it's time to hunt and urges them to show the monsters the true might of Zeekhart. The group charges forward to attack. Meanwhile, Raon stays behind with Wrath Spirit, not joining the battle. Wrath Spirit mocks the trainees for shouting before the fight even began, saying it gave away their position and ruined any element of surprise. Raon replies that maybe they were just trying to shake off their nerves. Screaming might help calm them down. After all, it's their first real monster hunt. Hearing that, Wrath Spirit thinks to himself, isn't this Raon's first hunt too? But Raon doesn't seem nervous at all. In fact, he observes everything calmly, as if he's a seasoned warrior who's been through countless battles. Back to the battlefield, Martha is enthusiastically tearing through monsters, but Burn reminds everyone that they should focus on the kobolds and goblins first before going after the orcs. Suddenly, some orcs break through the defensive line. Seeing this, Kanbar panics and instantly regrets volunteering as the guide. He even shuts his eyes out of fear, but Raon doesn't hesitate. He steps in and swiftly eliminates the approaching monsters. To Raon, they're nothing in the face of his power. He wipes them out effortlessly. Kanbar slowly opens his eyes, shocked to find that the monsters have already been defeated. Raon asks him if he's hurt, and Kanbar replies that he's okay. Then Raon says he has one question for him. Is there a legend or story passed down about these mountains? Something like a tale of a hidden treasure, or an incredibly powerful monster. Kanbar then mentioned that there was a story like that. According to what he knows, hundreds of years ago, the Goblin King of the Western region fought a knight on that very mountain. Kanbar also heard rumors that the Goblin King's ring was buried somewhere in those mountains. Hearing this, Raon quickly came to a conclusion. The strange presence he'd been sensing all along was actually from Eden. Eden is one of the dark forces on the continent. They formed a major faction known as Oma. Oma is made up of lunatics competing for the title of the most insane person in the world. Eden's ultimate goal is restoration. They believe that the era of despair 1,000 years ago, when monsters ruled the world, was paradise. So Eden was formed to bring back that era by reviving the god of monsters. If that were all, they'd simply be considered a bunch of madmen and wiped out. But Eden doesn't just control monsters, they can infuse monster powers into humans. What's worse is that their strength is on par with the Zeekhart family, and their twisted powers are so mysterious that even the most powerful families on the continent have no knowledge of them. Still, Raon knew their methods, thanks to Darius in his past life. Back then, when Raon was carrying out a mission assigned by Darius, he encountered Eden. His entire shadow unit was wiped out, and Raon was the only survivor. At the time, Raon didn't understand what had happened, but later, he started to question everything. Darius knew from the beginning that Eden used mana stones. So, how could someone like Darius have such specific knowledge and never tell anyone, especially when he was one of the 6 emperors? Just then, Wrath Spirit interrupted Raon's thoughts, asking what he was thinking about. He could feel Raon radiating with intense anger. It turns out that just thinking about Darius was enough to make Raon boil with rage. But now wasn't the time to let emotions take over. What mattered most was facing Eden. If what Kanbar said was true, then Eden's goal was clearly the mana stone of the Goblin King. It's been centuries since the Goblin King died in those mountains, so there's a good chance that a powerful mana stone still lies buried there, and that's what Eden is after. Raon realized that Eden likely sent those monsters just to trick Zeekhart into thinking the mission was complete. It was a distraction, to lure them away and keep them from interfering with Eden's real objective. Then the scene cuts to Burren, who's in the middle of battle, targeting what he believes is the leader of the monsters. Burren charges forward, hoping to finish it off with a single blow. But suddenly Martha shows up and declares that she'll be the one to take it down. After the monster falls, Burren orders everyone to wipe out the remaining enemies since their leader is already dead. Raon then turns to Kanbar and asks if anyone has ever found a gem or treasure in the mountains. Kanbar replies that when he was a child, the village chief once returned from the mountain carrying a red gemstone from the summit. Most villagers didn't know about it, but Kanbar believes that the gem is probably buried under the floor of the chief's house. Hearing that, Raon is shocked. If that's true, then the situation is far more serious than he expected. If Eden searched the mountain and didn't find the gem, they would destroy Cebu village to get it. Eventually, the group defeats every last monster. With the extermination complete, they all return to the village. There, they're welcomed warmly by the village chief and the townspeople. The chief personally thanks them on behalf of everyone. But despite the celebration, Raon still feels like something is off. Martha then asked Raon if everything had gone the way he expected. Still, she wasn't sure what Raon's true goal really was. Raon replied that he didn't quite understand it himself yet, but when the time came, he would explain everything. Martha responded by saying that Raon didn't need to worry. No matter what happened, she would follow his orders until the mission was complete. Just then, Runan approached Raon and asked what he was doing. Was something weighing on his mind? She said he didn't look okay. Raon told her that he was fine, that there was nothing wrong. Then he invited her to come along, saying the village chief was holding a celebration. But even as he said that, Raon kept thinking that Eden wouldn't make their move until the Zighart group had left the village. For now, they would probably just keep sending monsters, and tomorrow would be the critical moment. The next day, at the edge of Cebu village, the Zighart trainees were making their way back, believing their mission was complete. Burin, walking with the others, couldn't help but wonder why Raon hadn't reclaimed his position as leader yet. Burin felt confident that he hadn't done anything wrong in his leadership. He didn't know what Raon was trying to confirm, but he hoped that Raon recognized his ability to lead was on par with his own. Then Burin ordered everyone to pick up the pace. By afternoon, Raon suddenly told everyone to stop. The group looked around, confused as to why he was halting their march. They thought it was still too early to make camp. The sun was still up, and they could easily travel a bit farther. But Raon announced, "From here on out, the real mission begins." Burin immediately asked what he meant by that. Hadn't they already wiped out the monsters? Why was Raon saying the mission was only starting now? It made no sense to him. Raon calmly replied that their mission wasn't just to kill monsters and protect the village. Burin pushed back, "But we've already done that, so what's the issue?" Raon answered, "Someone's been watching us, not long ago." Whoever it was had been observing the Zighart team up until just an hour ago. Raon admitted that the person could have been an instructor, but he had sensed a powerful malicious intent coming from them. Raon went on to say that he had actually felt the presence even before they arrived at the village, and that same presence had disappeared toward a village about half a day away from their current location. Burin was stunned by this. He asked again, was Raon being serious? Martha then stepped forward and asked Raon if he had really sensed it before they even entered the village. Raon confirmed it. He'd felt it the moment they reached the hill near the road leading into town. Martha followed up with another question. "So, is that why you gave leadership to Burin? To draw attention away from yourself?" Raon nodded. "Exactly. I did it to better assess the enemy." Kane, who had been listening, was amazed by Raon's ability. Even during the battle, it was clear to him Raon was already beyond the level of an average instructor. After all, even he hadn't realized they were being watched. Burin then asked Raon if that was the only reason he had been given command. Raon confirmed it. As a commander, he believed that Burin was better suited to lead the others than he was. Even during training, Burin had already shown the qualities of a true leader, one of the best among them. Because of that, their enemy likely mistook Burin as the real leader, which helped keep Raon's presence hidden. Raon praised the way Burin handled leadership during the mission. In fact, he said Burin was truly worthy of being called a Zighart. Raon also told Burin that once they returned, he would recommend him as vice captain. Hearing that, Burin thought he might be able to compete with Raon. But then again, what Raon had done was something Burin could never pull off. So he felt like he still wasn't on the same level. Normally, monsters don't cooperate with other species. But in this mission, the monsters showed signs of coordination, which meant someone had to be controlling them. The mission the Zighart trainees were given was to protect the village. So as long as the village was still in danger, the mission wasn't over. Raon then declared that from this point on, they would return to the village. But this time, things would be different. They'd move as quietly as possible, so no one would detect them. Disguises would help. Unfortunately, not everyone had the skills to stay hidden, so Raon didn't force the issue. Suddenly, Dorian interrupted and told Raon that he had enough disguise tools for everyone. Surprised, Raon asked when Dorian had managed to gather all that gear. Dorian answered that he had brought it just in case. Hearing that, Raon was shocked. Dorian had packed 40 different disguises, just in case. Raon then gave an order for one person to head to the nearest branch and report their situation. The rest of them would now follow his commands without question. Any disobedience would not be tolerated. 5 hours later, we shift to Eden's temporary hideout near the mountain, close to Cebu village. There, someone reported that the Zigharts had left, and after checking the surrounding areas, there were no issues. Upon hearing the report, the Eden leader immediately gave the order to begin the operation. Then he used a skill called Restoration, transforming himself into an orc. He issued commands to the orcs. Eliminate everything that stands in their way. Leave no survivors. Meanwhile, the Zigharts had already returned to the mountain near Cebu and were observing the orc army marching toward the village. Seeing this, Burin was in disbelief. How could this be happening when they'd already wiped out all the monsters? Raon calmly told everyone to wait. It wasn't time to act yet because they still didn't know the enemy's true identity. Burin protested, saying that if they didn't act now, innocent villagers might get hurt. They had to step in. Raon explained that if they rushed in blindly, they'd be defeated. Burin pushed back, insisting their mission was to protect the village, so they had to fight now. But Raon reminded him their enemy was Eden. That meant they needed to be extra careful. The moment Raon said Eden, everyone froze. Even Martha immediately asked if he meant Eden from Oma. Raon nodded. Only Eden, or a monster of Lord class, could control monsters like this. That's why they couldn't afford to rush in without a plan. Burin then admitted that he understood Eden's power, and that Raon's orders made sense. But if they didn't act soon, half the villagers would die. So was Raon really planning to just sit back and watch innocent people get attacked, waiting for the right moment? Burren said he believed Raon was more deserving of the Sieghart name than he was. But that kind of logic, waiting while others suffered, was something Burren couldn't accept. Because to him, raising your sword to protect the weak, right now, was the duty of a Sieghart swordsman. Then Burren dashed forward to attack the monsters, declaring that, from now on, he didn't care whether the others followed him or not. As long as they considered themselves swordsmen of the Sieghart family, they should follow him. Hearing this, Runan turned to Raon and said she would go after Burren, then leapt off the cliff without hesitation. Seeing Burren act like that, the others started to realize that he had a point. Letting fear take over just because their enemies were from Eden would only tarnish the Sieghart name, especially when all of them were trainees under the command of the Six Emperors. So the other members began running forward, joining Burren in his attack. Meanwhile, the Sixth Squad didn't stand idle either. They followed Burren to support the Fifth Squad. All of this had already been predicted by Raon. He knew Burren and the others wouldn't sit still in the face of injustice. They would rise to stop Eden and their monsters. That's why Raon sent a message through Aura to Runan, telling her to follow Burren. Raon believed that Burren, Runan, and Cain would be able to hold off Eden for a while. What surprised Raon, however, was that Martha didn't join them. He had thought Martha would be the first one to charge in, but Martha calmly said she would follow Raon's orders until the end and wouldn't act recklessly. Hearing that, Raon could only smile. He then ordered the remaining members to head toward the village and regroup with the others, but he reminded them to make sure their presence stayed hidden. He was certain Eden still had reinforcements they hadn't revealed yet. In particular, Raon still sensed a powerful killing intent coming from deep within the mountains. The other enemies could be handled by the 5th and 6th squads, but that one was dangerous if faced head-on. However, if they used assassin tactics, it might be a different story. The scene then shifts to the 5th and 6th squads engage in a fierce battle with the monsters. After fighting for a while, Burren realized that these monsters were stronger than the ones they had faced before. Still, if the numbers stayed low, defending the village wouldn't be too hard. The real issue was Eden. They wouldn't stop at just sending monsters. Defeating these beasts wouldn't be the end of it. Burren then told the others to watch the skies and the trees, as enemies might be hiding there. And sure enough, many soldiers from Eden's Green Phantom Corps were waiting in the trees, ready to join the battle. Burren had expected this, but he hadn't imagined there would be this many. Even with a rough estimate, there were more than 40 enemies. Quickly, Burren began to execute a plan. He ordered the 6th squad to hold back the monsters from entering the village. At the same time, he asked Renan to freeze the feet of the monsters and the Green Phantom Corps using her ice powers. Once they were frozen in place, Burren would lead the charge to strike them directly. Following Burren's orders, Renan unleashed her ability, freezing the enemy's feet one by one. As soon as they were immobilized, Burren readied his skill and lunged into the front lines to attack. But suddenly, a Green Phantom Corps member appeared above Burren, ready to strike. Luckily, Burren dodged the ambush just in time. However, that wasn't the end of it. Poisoned arrows began raining down from above. To make matters worse, the enemy also released a poisonous mist across the battlefield, aiming to weaken the Sieghart troops. Realizing what was happening, Burren quickly ordered everyone to cover their mouths. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The poison had spread, and now none of them could use their aura. On top of that, no one could move their bodies as they wanted. If things continued like this, the Siegharts would lose for sure. Then suddenly, a massive attack burst forth, completely blocking Burren's view. It turned out that the attack came from Martha, who had arrived just in time to help the others. After that, she ordered everyone to eliminate the enemies and not let a single one slip through. With reinforcements arriving, the 5th and 6th squads were finally saved and managed to push the enemy back. The enemy clearly hadn't expected the Siegharts to be this strong. Just as the Green Phantom Corps were trying to retreat, the leader of Eden appeared, shocking everyone. Standing before them was a being even stronger than the Green Phantom Corps, the Green Battle Phantom. The Green Battle Phantom was one of Eden's lower-ranked executives. Burren asked why someone like him was there, but the Green Battle Phantom ignored the question and commented that, for trainees, they didn't look too bad. Judging by their strength, Martha should have already known they couldn't take him down, and yet none of them ran away. So the Green Battle Phantom declared that he would kill them all for not knowing their limits. Then he launched his attack. With just a single strike, Burren, Martha, and Runan were completely overwhelmed and collapsed on the spot. Seeing the three of them fall with just one attack, the other squad members began wondering, where were Raon and Cain? There was no way Raon would just sit back and watch the others get taken down like that. Then, Martha started to get back on her feet. Seeing her try to stand again, the Green Battle Phantom wasn't surprised at all. He figured Martha had sensed Eden's presence from the beginning, so it made sense. Still, to Eden, Martha was nothing more than a seed that needed to be destroyed. That's why he declared that everyone would die by his hands right then and there. But before that could happen, Raon suddenly appeared behind the Green Battle Phantom and launched a surprise attack using all the power he had. Raon believed this was his perfect chance to take him out in a single blow. Unfortunately, the attack only managed to slice off one of the Green Battle Phantom's arms. It wasn't enough to kill him. Then the Green Battle Phantom said that if he hadn't tilted his body just in time, Raon would have cut his head clean off. Raon replied that he must be insane for sacrificing his arm just to dodge the attack. Raon had used his best assassin technique to end it all, but even that wasn't enough. After Raon's attack failed to defeat the Green Battle Phantom in a single strike, the Phantom remarked that Raon was strong enough to cut off his arm. He even admitted that Raon had considerable potential for a Sieghart. But to the enemy, Raon's ability went no further than that. From his current condition, it was clear he had exhausted all his stamina on that one strike. Hearing those words, Raon realized it was true. He had forced himself to try ending the battle with that attack, and now he could hardly move properly. Raon then asked if he was the one leading the monsters in the attack. The Green Battle Phantom scoffed, saying his superior would never reveal himself in a small village like Cebu. With that, the Phantom lunged forward again. Raon hadn't fully recovered and wasn't ready to fight yet, but in his mind, the same also applied to his opponent. When the Phantom's attack came, Raon managed to block it. That shocked the Phantom, who hadn't expected Raon to be this capable. Raon then declared, "If I can't block something like that, I'd better stop being a swordsman altogether." The clash between them grew fierce, each striking and countering blow for blow. Watching the fight, Burn was stunned. The Green Battle Phantom had defeated him and the others in a single strike, yet Raon was fighting on equal footing, and he was even using the same sword technique Burn used. Burn realized that while he once thought he could catch up to Raon, the truth was Raon was already far beyond the other trainees. Martha then spoke up, telling Burn that this was Raon's true strength. What he had shown before was only a fraction of his power, but from Martha's perspective, Raon's current strength still wasn't enough to defeat the Green Battle Phantom, since they appeared evenly matched. Meanwhile, Raon hadn't had enough time to recover his strength and aura after his earlier desperate strike. Seeing this, Martha began to doubt whether Raon could really win with only the little energy he had left. At that moment, Runan arrived and insisted that they had to help Raon. Martha argued back that they were weaker, and if they attacked recklessly, they would be killed in a single blow. Even Martha, who was stronger than Runan, held herself back, but Runan calmly replied that it didn't matter. At first, Martha had thought Runan was simply afraid, but now, Runan seemed calmer than ever, a sign she had changed from the girl who used to only hide behind Raon. Burn, feeling ashamed of his earlier hesitation, agreed with Runan that they needed to help. Martha objected again, saying even if all three of them joined in, nothing would change, since the Phantom had defeated them with a single strike before. But Burn stood firm, saying that even so, he couldn't just turn away and leave Raon to fight alone. They were Sieghart swordsmen, and they couldn't simply stand back and watch. Finally, Martha gave up on stopping them, and decided to join in as well. But before moving to help, she warned Burn and Runan they would have to take full responsibility if anything went wrong, because this battle meant putting their very lives on the line. We returned to the battle between Raon and the Green Battle Phantom. The Phantom couldn't believe that a trainee like Raon was able to hold out against him for so long. He even admitted that Raon was exceptionally talented enough that he wanted to recruit him into Eden. The Phantom then asked Raon for his name. Raon calmly replied, "Raon Sieghart." Hearing this, the Phantom pressed further, asking if Raon was a direct descendant of the Sieghart family. From Raon's hair and eye color, he could feel that the blood of the head of the family flowed within him. Realizing this, the Phantom immediately took back his offer of recruitment. If he had known earlier, he would have killed Raon without hesitation. He then unleashed even greater power and charged at Raon once more. Raon was shocked. His enemy's attacks were faster than before. Thankfully, Raon managed to dodge in time. The Phantom was burning away his own life force to gain more strength. Meanwhile, Raon struggled to survive using the Ring of Fire, though his body hadn't fully recovered. At that moment, Martha appeared behind the Phantom, ready to strike. She wasn't alone. Runan and Burn also joined in, attacking the Phantom together. But their efforts had no effect. The Phantom easily caught Burn, proving that they were still far too weak. To even hurt him, they needed to at least be on Raon's level. Burn admitted the Phantom was right. They couldn't land a proper blow, but at the very least, they could buy Raon some time to recover. Martha then released her aura and launched another attack. Her strike managed to wound the Phantom slightly, but it wasn't enough. Soon after, both Martha and Burn were defeated once again. On the other side, Raon finally regained his strength and began unleashing his aura. He told the others that this time, he would make the most of his opportunity. Seeing the energy surrounding Raon, the Phantom grew uneasy, wondering just who Raon really was to still possess such immense power. Raon ignored his question and declared that Eden should feel honored because the technique he was about to use would be unleashed on an enemy for the very first time. At first, Raon had believed he couldn't perform it, but through this battle, he realized he could. The name of this technique was Wind of Bledging Dominion. The Phantom was shaken. Raon's fiery aura was different from before. His instincts screamed that this fire was dangerous, and that he needed to kill Raon no matter what. The Phantom lunged at Raon once more, but before he could land his strike, Raon cut him down with his technique. With that single slash, the Green Battle Phantom was finally defeated. Raon's companions looked on in shock, unable to believe that Raon had actually slain the Phantom. After that, Raon told the other trainees that there were still Eden's monsters left and ordered them to finish them off for the safety of the village. Hearing Raon's command, the trainees immediately moved out and wiped out every last one of them. Soon after, Burn approached Raon and admitted that Raon had been right, If not for Raon and the reinforcements, he and the others would have been defeated, and the entire village would have been slaughtered. He then thanked Raon for saving their lives and apologized for disobeying his orders. Even so, Burn explained that he would still have chosen to go to the village, because he couldn't turn a blind eye to injustice. Even if he wasn't strong enough, that wasn't something worthy of a Sieghart. Raon simply replied, "Good work." He told Burn that because they had all fought with everything they had, he had been able to find an opening to strike the Green Battle Phantom. Their victory wasn't his alone, it was thanks to everyone. If even one of them hadn't stepped up, who could say how things would have ended? That was why Raon wanted to thank them all. Hearing Raon's gratitude, Burn declared that next time, he would become even stronger, so something like this wouldn't happen again. He asked Raon to wait for him, because one day he would carry out his duty without needing Raon's help. Raon then turned to Martha, telling her that she had worked hard as well. By distracting the Green Battle Phantom at the critical moment, she had allowed Raon to recover. He genuinely appreciated how well she had followed his command. But Martha snapped back that she would rather bite off her tongue and die than follow Raon's orders. She said she would return to the village first to help with repairs and told Raon to take it easy for now and come back when he could. After everyone left, Raon finally began to feel the after effects of using too much power and was overwhelmed with fatigue. Just then, Runan appeared and caught him as he almost collapsed. She thought he was about to faint, but Raon assured her he was fine. Curious, he asked why she was still there. Runan answered that she had stayed because Raon looked just like he did after training in the practice yard, when all his strength seemed to leave his body. Hearing that, Raon felt a bit of relief. It wasn't just him protecting the others, sometimes they protected him too. Then suddenly, a status window appeared, notifying Raon that he had grown stronger after surpassing his limits in battle. He had gained the trait Unseen Strike and the title Unbreaking Spirit for defeating an opponent stronger than himself. Since he needed to check his rewards, Raon told Runan he was fine now and ordered her to return to the village first, while he stayed behind to scout the area for any remaining threats. Afterward, Raon sat alone on a rock and opened his status window to examine his rewards. The title Unbreaking Spirit increased his stats by 3% whenever he faced a stronger enemy. The trait Unseen Strike belonged to assassins, allowing him to deal additional critical damage during surprise attacks, while concealing his presence as he struck. At that moment, the Wrath Spirit appeared, shocked at the rewards Raon had received. To him, it made no sense. Raon had only fought against a weakling, so why was he given such incredible rewards? Raon thanked the Wrath Spirit, saying it was thanks to him that he grew stronger every day. Hearing that, the spirit grew furious, vowing that Raon would never die peacefully, that he would rip Raon's body apart over and over until nothing was left. But Raon calmly replied, "If you can, then try. I'm ready to face it any time." His words only made the Wrath Spirit even angrier. Meanwhile, the trainees were busy working together to repair the damage in the village. At that time, Raon had just woken up. When he stepped out of the house, he saw that everyone had already finished the repairs while he was asleep. Suddenly, Runan approached him and asked if he was awake and if he was feeling better. Raon replied that he was indeed feeling much better after some rest. Hearing that, Runan immediately told him there was a place they needed to go, because everyone was waiting for him. It turned out that Runan was taking him to the villagers of Cebu. They had been waiting to personally thank Raon, the savior of their village. They also expressed their gratitude to the Siegharts, who had risked their lives to protect them. Without the Siegharts, the village of Cebu would surely have perished. From that day on, the villagers vowed never to forget what the Siegharts had done for them. Hearing their words, Raon felt something he had never experienced before, the respect and admiration of his comrades, as well as the gratitude and emotions of the people he had protected. In his previous life as an assassin, Raon had never once received kindness. His world had only been life and death. Everything he had was stolen by Darius. No matter how many people he killed or how many dirty missions he carried out for Darius, he was never recognized, because all recognition went only to Darius. But now, for the first time in his life, Raon was receiving acknowledgement from many people. And with that recognition came a new desire. He wanted more. He wanted to be admired by even more people. From this moment on, Raon decided that his life would be as a swordsman, not as an assassin. He wanted to create countless moments like this in the future and achieve even greater things. Afterward, Raon went to speak privately with the village chief. The chief asked what Raon wanted to know. Raon directly asked if he knew who was behind the orc attack on Cebu. The chief answered that, according to Burn, it was Eden, one of Oma's groups. But he admitted he had no idea why Eden would target their village, which was nothing more than a small, insignificant place. Raon then told the chief that, during the previous battle, Kanbar had mentioned the chief bringing a red gem down from the mountain peak. Shocked, the chief admitted it was true. When he was young, he had found the gem on the mountain and brought it back to the village. Only now did he realize, could all of this chaos have been caused by that gem? Raon confirmed it. Eden's entire purpose was to obtain that gem. The chief was shaken, never imagining that everything had happened because of his actions. Raon explained that, while they had managed to stop Eden this time, as long as the gem remained in the village, Eden would continue to come for it, and that was something they could not allow. The chief then revealed that after burying the gem, the soil around the village had become fertile, bringing prosperity to their people. The villagers had revered it as a guardian spirit, but in truth, it was a mana stone, something that would inevitably draw Eden's attention. The chief asked what they should do now. Should they dig it up and throw it away? Raon replied that he would take the gem with him. He explained that Eden viewed humans as nothing more than sacrifices to restore their power. Even if the chief tried to discard it, Eden would eventually find it. That was why Raon intended to take it back to Sieghart. But upon hearing that, the chief grew worried. If the mana stone was brought to Sieghart, wouldn't that mean Eden would target them instead? The chief couldn't bear the thought of burdening their saviors by dragging them into even more danger. Raon told him it was fine, because this was exactly how the Siegharts handled such matters. Hearing those words, the village chief thanked Raon once again, saying that Sieghart had given them help this time that was beyond measure. But Raon paused, curious about the chief's choice of words. This time as well. Did that mean Sieghart had helped the village before? The chief then explained that decades ago, the head of the Sieghart family, Glenn himself, had once saved Cebu village. He remembered it clearly. Glenn, much like Raon, had driven off a monster invasion, but instead of being cold and distant, he had smiled warmly and treated the villagers with great kindness. Hearing this, Raon couldn't imagine the head of the family being warm and gentle. From what he had seen, the family had seemed incapable of such behavior. The chief then dug into the ground and retrieved the red gem he had buried long ago. It had been wrapped in a cloth passed down through generations, which concealed the crimson glow that emanated from it. When Raon saw the gem, he realized that if it were to fall into Eden's hands, it could give birth to a monster with the power of the Goblin King. He immediately told the chief to wrap it back in the cloth, but then a voice suddenly cut in, saying he now understood why the gem had been so hard to find. It was because the cloth used to cover it concealed its aura. Raon froze in shock. How could someone get that close to him without him noticing? He hadn't sensed their presence at all. He demanded to know who the stranger was. The man pulled out a mask and asked Raon if he could guess his identity. The moment Raon saw the mask, he recognized it and asked if he was the Mad Blood Demon. Surprised, the Mad Blood Demon admitted he didn't expect a mere trainee to recognize his mask. He also remarked that Raon's power was immeasurable, which meant Raon had to be the one who defeated the Green Battle Phantom. Raon questioned why he was here, since the Phantom had said the Mad Blood Demon wouldn't show up. The man replied it was because the Phantom had died by Raon's hand. In other words, he had come specifically because of Raon. He then placed the mask on his face and unleashed a murderous aura so overwhelming that Raon's body went numb. Even if Raon used all of his strength, he wouldn't stand a chance. Even if every trainee in the village joined in, they still wouldn't be able to win. At that moment, the Wrath Spirit appeared, telling Raon there was no way he could defeat this enemy. He only had two choices, die fighting a hopeless battle, or surrender his body to the Wrath Spirit. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the village, Burin and the other trainees were busy building fences. Martha strolled up and mocked him, saying he looked more like a carpenter than a swordsman. Then Runan arrived, carrying fruit she wanted to give to Raon. Seeing this, Martha teased her, saying that if Renan kept acting so loyal to Raon, people would start mistaking them for a married couple. Runan ignored her completely and went off to find Raon, but suddenly a loud explosion shook the area, startling everyone. Runan instantly knew the blast had come from where Raon was and dashed off, dropping her fruit to the ground. Burin and Martha followed immediately, shouting for all the trainees to prepare for battle. When the three of them arrived near Raon's location, they called out his name, asking if he was all right. But there was no response, until another explosion erupted. They then saw Raon hurled through the air alongside the village chief, and Raon's condition looked dire. After Raon realized that his friends had come to him, he quickly entrusted the village chief to Burin and ordered them to escort him to safety. But before they could leave, the Mad Blood Demon unleashed a terrifying pressure upon them, making it hard to breathe, like their lungs were about to collapse. At the same time, he seemed slightly disappointed in them. For those who carried the name of Sieghart, they couldn't even withstand his pressure. Raon then shouted at them to snap out of it. If they just stood there like statues, they would all end up dying for nothing. That's why Raon ordered everyone to focus their auras to resist the pressure. He also instructed Burin to return to the village immediately and evacuate the people, while Renan and Martha were told to fall back and prepare to assist when needed. There was one more thing Raon told the three of them. Never, under any circumstances, should they think about fighting the Mad Blood Demon head-on. All they needed to do was carefully observe the situation. Raon also reminded them of Rimmer's words. They had to push past their limits, and this was the moment to do it. Hearing Raon say all this, the Mad Blood Demon burst into laughter, because merely surpassing their limits was nowhere near enough to defeat him. Raon, on the other hand, thought about the trainees and the villagers behind him. If he were to fall, everything would be over. That's why, right now, he was desperately trying to find an opening, to strike and sever the Mad Blood Demon's head. No matter what, Raon had to do it, even if it seemed impossible, as if he were standing at the edge of a bottomless abyss. In his previous life, even then, he would have struggled against the Mad Blood Demon, let alone now. Then, the Mad Blood Demon suddenly rushed forward to attack Raon, since he was standing still. He was faster than before, shocking Raon, who instinctively unleashed his Thousand Flames technique to defend. But it was easily pierced through, forcing Raon to take the attack head-on. With great effort, Raon managed to deflect the trajectory of the strike just enough to dodge. If not for his ability to read the flow of attacks with the Ring of Fire, he would have already been dead. After that exchange, Raon thought about retreating, but it wasn't possible yet. He also needed the others to watch his fight with the Mad Blood Demon, because observing this battle was the only chance for survival. The Mad Blood Demon attacked again, but Raon narrowly avoided his blows. The demon seemed thrilled that Raon's strength didn't crumble with just a single strike. He also grew curious about how the Green War Demon had lost to Raon, but after witnessing Raon's strength firsthand, it all started to make sense. Still, he felt a twinge of disappointment, because Raon's aura was fire, and fire was useless against him. This was thanks to the helmet he wore, which granted him the ogre trait. Ogres were monsters naturally immune to fire. Even when pierced with countless flaming arrows, he could still move freely without difficulty. Knowing this, the Mad Blood Demon taunted Raon, saying he should already understand that no matter how much aura he released, it would be meaningless. Raon calmly replied that fire was indeed useless. But he had something else to use. Raon then shifted his aura into Cold Aura, which left the Mad Blood Demon slightly stunned. He was shocked that a mere trainee like Raon could wield not only elemental aura, but also sword energy at such a young age. Once again, the Mad Blood Demon demanded to know who Raon really was. But Raon simply replied that he didn't need to know, because soon, the Mad Blood Demon would die by his hands. Hearing such arrogance, the Mad Blood Demon immediately charged at Raon, and Raon too advanced to strike back. Their clash erupted in yet another explosion. Meanwhile, Burren and the others finally returned to where Raon was fighting. The moment Burren saw Raon again, he was shocked, because this time, Raon's aura wasn't the familiar flames, but cold aura, meaning Raon possessed not just one, but two different elemental auras. On top of that, Raon was simultaneously using sword energy. That meant Raon had already reached the level of a sword expert. Warriors across the world were divided into stages of power. No matter what weapon they wielded, swords or otherwise, they were classified by how much they had mastered aura. Those just beginning to grasp aura were called beginners. Those who could skillfully channel aura through their bodies and weapons were known as aura users. And when aura users refined their skill to the point of releasing aura on their blades, creating what's called sword energy, they became aura experts. In other words, Raon was now truly standing at the level of a sword expert. Still, Burren found it hard to believe his eyes. Watching Raon hold his ground one-on-one against the Mad Blood Demon, a warrior said to be at the very peak of the expert stage. Yet, even so, Raon was only able to endure, unable to land a decisive blow against his foe. The gap in their strength was undeniable, so it was no surprise that Raon could only fight defensively. Then suddenly Raon glanced toward Burren. Burren immediately understood the signal. It was Raon's way of telling him he was about to create an opening for a joint attack. Burren recognized it instantly because of the countless hours they'd spent together in training. At the same time, Martha and Runan also caught the meaning behind Raon's look. With that, Raon launched himself forward, striking with Cold Aura to pin down the Mad Blood Demon's movements, while commanding his comrades to attack. Without hesitation, his friends surged forward, seizing the opening Raon had created. Both Martha and Burren believed this was it, that their combined assault would succeed and bring victory. But things weren't so simple. The Mad Blood Demon had been expecting this. In an instant, he unleashed his aura, blasting everyone away and scattering their attack. Only Raon managed to remain standing before him. The Mad Blood Demon sneered, amused that they had saved him the trouble of hunting them down, one, by foolishly charging all together. He declared that watching people lose hope and fall into despair was something he never tired of. Then he pressed forward again, striking at Raon with even greater force. But Raon replied that he too had been waiting for this moment. All the killing intent he had honed in his previous life as an assassin merged with the chilling power of his cold aura, then condensed into a single point through the Thousand Flames technique. From that fusion, a new technique was born, Zenith. The strike was devastating, its sheer force shaking the earth and tearing apart the ground behind the Mad Blood Demon. However, that attack still wasn't strong enough to wound the Mad Blood Demon, even though Raon had concentrated all his aura into a single point. What's worse, if Raon had made even the slightest mistake using that technique, he would have died instantly. The Mad Blood Demon then struck him, sending Raon flying. The gap between their abilities was simply too vast. Earlier, the Mad Blood Demon had weakened his aura, giving Raon the illusion of having a chance. But even Raon's strongest strike couldn't pierce the demon's hardened muscles, since he had reinforced both his skin and body to block the blade. With power like that, the Mad Blood Demon clearly stood at the level of an Aura Master. Realizing this, Raon immediately told his comrades that their plan was over. He ordered everyone to retreat at once. They couldn't defeat the Mad Blood Demon now. So, Raon demanded that they leave immediately and evacuate all the villagers. There was no more time to waste. Both the trainees and the villagers had to be evacuated if they wanted to minimize casualties. Raon shouted at Burren not to be stubborn, otherwise he would only die a pointless death trying to face everything the Zekhart way. Hearing this, Burren had no choice but to obey. He ordered the trainees to focus on escaping the Mad Blood Demon and saving as many lives as they could. Meanwhile, Runan looked back at Raon and pleaded, telling him he must not die. Raon, hearing her words, could only smile faintly. The mad blood demon sneered, declaring that none of them would escape anyway, since Raon already looked like he couldn't hold on much longer. At that moment, Raon called out to the Wrath Spirit and made him an offer. The spirit was delighted, but also remarked that Raon's condition was pitiful. He looked like he could die at any second. Curious, the Wrath Spirit asked what Raon had to offer him. Raon replied with his deal. Whether it was Raon or the mad blood demon who died, he wanted the Wrath Spirit to restore his aura and body. In exchange, Raon would allow the spirit to pour his rage into him. The Wrath Spirit accepted. In an instant, Raon's body and aura were healed, while at the same time, searing wrath was injected into him. The overwhelming rage ripped through Raon's body with unbearable pain. The mad blood demon was startled, shocked at how Raon could suddenly recover, as if nothing had happened. He couldn't comprehend how Raon had healed so quickly, but Raon simply told him that it wasn't something he needed to understand. Instead, he invited the mad blood demon to keep fighting, because Raon intended to entertain him until sunset. Elsewhere, Byrne was leading the trainees out of the village. They had to move fast. There was no time left. The trainees began to panic, questioning why something like this had to happen right when they were here. Martha silenced them, explaining that Raon was holding off a monster all by himself just so they could escape. His condition was already terrible, his arm broken, his ribs shattered, yet he still stood his ground. So, Martha demanded that none of them complain if they couldn't even help Raon in his desperate struggle. Hearing her words, Byrne agreed and immediately ordered everyone to stop whining and move faster. Meanwhile, Crane had already gone ahead to request reinforcements from the nearest outpost. That gave Byrne hope that help would arrive soon. But then, suddenly ogres appeared behind them, surrounding the trainees. Byrne froze in shock. How could these monsters be here? And not just one or two, but an entire group working together. That was impossible. Ogres never fought cooperatively. Seeing this, Martha immediately concluded that this must be Eden's doing. She had heard rumors that they could control monsters. Meanwhile, the reason the mad blood demon ignored the others was because he had already unleashed the ogres from the start, predicting exactly how things would play out. At that point, the trainees were completely hopeless, convinced they were all going to die. But Byrne shouted for them not to give up. Raon was still fighting. If they died in vain, how could they ever face Raon, who was battling the mad blood demon alone? Martha agreed with Byrne, and Runan added that they needed to secure the villagers first. Then, they would return to save Raon. With that, the three of them made up their minds. They would not die there, because the greatest respect they could show Raon, who was fighting alone for their sake, was to keep moving forward. Together, they charged at the ogres. But suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept through, crushing the ogres with ease, leaving Byrne stunned. The scene then shifted back to Raon, who was already at his absolute limit. The mad blood demon ordered him to surrender. Raon's condition was worse than ever. His left arm had broken again even after the Wrath Spirit had restored it. Raon even thought about cutting off his arm, believing it was just getting in the way and that doing so might allow him to fight a little longer. His vision began to blur as he drifted toward unconsciousness, wondering why he was putting himself through this. His muscles and skin screamed in agony, a pain more intense than anything he had ever endured, even in his past life. The Raon of the past would have already run away without hesitation. Then, Raon suddenly recalled his mother's words, her wish for him to become a swordsman worthy of the Zeekhart name. With that memory, Raon realized why he was doing all this. It was because of the bonds he had formed with so many people. Runan, who seemed indifferent to others, turned out to be kinder than anyone. Byrne, though reckless at first, was now chasing his dreams. And Martha, stubborn yet unshakable, stood as a pillar of strength. Raon would be lying if he said he felt nothing for them. The truth was, he wanted to protect them. Slowly but surely, he was becoming a true swordsman of the Zeekhart family. At that moment, the Wrath Spirit appeared, asking if Raon had truly accepted his wrath just to buy his friends time to escape. Raon admitted that was true. The spirit then praised him, calling him remarkable, but he warned that there was a limit to how long Raon could keep suppressing his wrath. Even now, after taking it in, Raon could barely stand. The Wrath Spirit told him bluntly, the moment Raon accepted his wrath, he had already been doomed to fail. Perhaps Raon could resist the spirit's attempt to seize control of his body, but by allowing that wrath inside, everything was already sealed. Meanwhile, the mad blood demon sneered, saying Raon had reached his limit. But instead of killing him, he decided it would be more entertaining to slaughter Raon's friends first, saving Raon for last. The thought of Raon's expression as he watched his comrades beheaded thrilled him. Hearing this, Raon was filled with rage and frustration at his own helplessness. His friends were still mere trainees. They couldn't possibly withstand the strength of an Aura Master. That's why Raon resolved to keep fighting, no matter what, until they were safe. Forcing himself back onto his feet, he declared that he, a direct descendant of Glenn Zeekhart, would one day become the strongest swordsman on the continent. And, until his heart stopped beating, he would not move from his place or let the mad blood demon advance. The mad blood demon smirked, praising Raon's spirit, and promised to face him seriously in return. He said he would remember the name Raon forever before launching another attack. By then, Raon had no strength left to dodge. The strike was about to land, when suddenly a fierce wind swept through the battlefield. It was the sign that Rimmer had finally arrived. When Rimmer arrived, he immediately blocked the Mad Blood Demon's strike that had been aimed at Raon. Raon muttered that Rimmer was late, but Rimmer casually apologized, saying he had overslept. He added that he would handle the rest, so Raon could finally rest. The Mad Blood Demon was stunned, wondering how Rimmer had appeared here. Rimmer replied that he simply couldn't stand watching his student being trampled on by trash like the Mad Blood Demon. Hearing this, the Mad Blood Demon was surprised to realize that Rimmer was the supervisor of the trainee mission. If that was the case, it meant the Sieghart family had truly fallen. Their battle began immediately. The Mad Blood Demon mocked Rimmer, saying he was nothing like the swordsman he used to be. His attacks barely landed, and even his balance seemed off. The Mad Blood Demon then asked if the rumors were true, that Rimmer's energy core had been destroyed, leaving him crippled. But Rimmer only laughed, saying it was nothing more than a rumor. Why would the Mad Blood Demon believe such nonsense? Whether in the past or now, Eden was always behind on the truth. It had been a long time since Rimmer had stood on the front lines, yet that story still lingered. The Mad Blood Demon insisted that Rimmer was lying, because his swordplay was clearly weaker than before. His strikes now felt like nothing more than a gentle breeze. Convinced Rimmer couldn't possibly fight him like this, the Mad Blood Demon unleashed even greater power and attacked. Yet Rimmer dodged with ease. His movements were flawless, even without aura. Watching this, Raon thought to himself, if Rimmer used aura, he would have already won. But why was he fighting without it? Was Rimmer deliberately displaying pure swordsmanship for Raon to see? He must be insane to use a deadly battle as a lesson. Then Rimmer taunted, saying the Mad Blood Demon talked too much and still couldn't catch a weakling like him. Infuriated, the Mad Blood Demon demanded that Rimmer stop playing around and fight seriously. Rimmer, realizing he couldn't keep taking it easy forever, turned serious. He ordered Raon to watch closely. He was about to show him how the Siegharts fought, and the level Raon needed to reach one day. At that moment, Rimmer unleashed a technique called Sword Field Realization. The aura spread and pressed down over the entire battlefield, making the Mad Blood Demon realize he couldn't escape. The only way out was to destroy it. So he charged forward to attack Rimmer, and Rimmer charged right back. The collision between them was devastating, shaking the battlefield with a massive explosion. Afterward, the Mad Blood Demon admitted that Rimmer had compressed half his body and aura into a single force, gathering all the wind into his blade, what was known as a sword field. Yet he still couldn't believe what he was sensing. How could someone without Sieghart blood, like Rimmer, create a sword field? Rimmer corrected him. It wasn't a true sword field. It was merely an imitation, borrowing the power of nature, because elves were deeply attuned to it. The Mad Blood Demon then spoke again, saying there was one thing he regretted. He hadn't killed Raon. No matter what, Raon had to be eliminated. If Raon continued to exist, he would eventually disrupt Eden's grand plan. Hearing this, Rimmer replied that he could never allow their young lord to fall into the hands of trash like Eden. The Mad Blood Demon then turned to Raon, acknowledging that he indeed had the qualifications to be a king, but he warned Raon not to become complacent, because Eden still had talents capable of rivaling him. Today I may have lost to Rimmer, the Mad Blood Demon said, but no one knows what the future holds. After the battle, Rimmer approached Raon and told him that the sword field was a technique every Sieghart swordsman had to master. Unlike mages, who created barriers with mana, swordsmen forged their barrier through soul, experience, and momentum. A sword field was born by fusing everything: experience, achievements, aura, even one's vision of the future. And since Raon was a direct descendant of Sieghart, he too would one day be able to create one. Until that day came, Rimmer urged Raon to keep learning and gaining experience. At that moment, Raon's comrades came rushing to him, overjoyed to see he was still alive. Meanwhile, Rimmer reflected silently. For those without Sieghart blood, opening a sword field demanded harsh conditions. Beyond experience, it required extraordinary talent in attributes and vitality that surpassed physical strength, and it consumed life itself. With his shattered energy core, opening a sword field placed an immense burden on Rimmer, yet he felt no regret for what he had done. Because what Raon had shown him earlier was proof that a new king had been born. When Rimmer looked at Raon, he made his decision. He would recognize Raon as his new king. For Rimmer, who had lost his sense of life since his energy core was destroyed, the children in his trainee squad had given him new meaning. They had become his reason to live, and so he did not regret losing a piece of his lifespan. Before his life ran out, Rimmer wanted only one thing: to witness Raon becoming the new king of Sieghart. After finishing his business in Cebu village, Rimmer immediately went to the head of the family to report everything that had happened. He also didn't forget to mention that Raon had fought against the Mad Blood Demon in Cebu. Hearing this, the head of the family was shocked and asked Rimmer why he chose to bring up such a thing. Rimmer replied that his purpose was to see the head's reaction directly after hearing the news. He added that even he himself found it hard to believe what he had witnessed. But it was still an undeniable truth, and it wasn't just him who saw it. Members of the 5th and 6th squads had witnessed it too. They all saw Raon standing alone against the Mad Blood Demon. The head of the family then remarked that the mad blood demon was strong enough to rival a swordmaster. So, if Raon had truly faced such a monster head-on, he wanted to know just how badly Raon had been injured. Rimmer explained that Raon had suffered quite a few serious wounds. Even his bones had been broken during the fight. Yet despite that, Raon managed to survive until Rimmer arrived. Still, the head of the family couldn't believe Rimmer's words. Rimmer reassured him again, saying that, while it might be hard to accept, once the head saw Raon's current strength, already at the level of a sword expert, he would have no choice but to believe. Not only that, Raon had managed to survive against the Mad Blood Demon, an aura master. Because of this, Rimmer argued that Raon deserved a rare treasure known as Elvrine's sap, the resin of the Second World Tree, a treasure more valuable than gold. Hearing this, the head of the family suspected that Rimmer simply favored Raon too much. But Rimmer clarified that it wasn't favoritism. He only wanted to help Raon and the other members grow stronger. Afterward, the head instructed his assistant to summon the Grand Elders, since they would be holding a family meeting once the trainees returned. Then, surprisingly, the head of the family praised Rimmer with a rare "good job." This stunned Rimmer, as such words almost never came from the head. He then asked when the trainees would be returning. Rimmer replied that it wouldn't be long, since everything in Cebu village had already been resolved. The scene then shifted back to Raon. He was reflecting on how their mission had been disrupted by Eden's interference. But in the end, the mission was still completed. After the Mad Blood Demon's attack, Cebu village had suffered heavy damage, so the trainees decided to stay a few more days to help with the repairs. Among all the trainees, Raon was the only one gravely injured, so he remained at the village chief's house to recover instead of helping with the repairs. When Raon finally woke up, he noticed the reward he had earned from his bet with the Wrath Spirit. Of course, the Wrath Spirit was furious. He claimed Raon had cheated by receiving help from Rimmer during the fight with the Mad Blood Demon. Because of that, he declared the bet void, with no winner. Even so, Raon still received status points as a reward. On top of that, he also unlocked a new trait, Indomitable Will, which temporarily boosts mental endurance. This trait also reduced the pain Raon felt when going through severe physical or psychological trauma. Raon never expected to gain such a trait, but with it, he could now resist the Wrath Spirit's rage. On the other hand, the Wrath Spirit grew even more frustrated. The system seemed far too kind to Raon, always giving him exactly what he needed. If not for that new trait, the Wrath Spirit would have been able to take over Raon's body by now. Still, the Wrath Spirit forced himself to remain calm. He had plenty of time, and bit by bit, his power was rapidly returning. This time, he even managed to plant seeds of wrath inside Raon's body. So, while Raon's growth was extraordinary, the Wrath Spirit was convinced that, in the end, he would be the true victor. The scene then shifted to the front of the Sieghart family's main hall. There, all the trainees were greeted by the family's chief administrator. The trainees, however, were exhausted and only wanted to go home and sleep. But before they could return, the administrator ordered them to meet with the head of the family first. Once inside, they bowed and paid their respects to the family head. Meanwhile, the gathered nobles and elders began whispering about Raon, finding it hard to believe what he had accomplished in Cebu village. Raon, however, saw this as the perfect chance to prove himself, especially since so many high-ranking family members were present. He recalled something from his mission in Cebu. If he stayed as he was now, he would be trapped, forced only to survive whenever facing stronger enemies. That was why he needed to grow stronger and fast. Not only were the division leaders and grand elders present, but even the direct bloodline of Sieghart had gathered in the audience hall. That meant the head of the family considered this meeting important. He was strict about separating private matters from official business, which also meant he was fair when it came to rewarding achievements. For Raon, that left only one option. He had to showcase his accomplishments from the mission and earn new martial arts to grow stronger. The head of the family then asked Raon to explain everything that had happened in Cebu. Raon calmly began recounting the events from the moment they arrived in the village. At that time, he had immediately noticed they were being watched. Soon after, they fought against the Green War Demon, who had come to seize the Mana Stone of the Goblin King. Raon thought the mission was over once the Green War Demon was slain, but unfortunately, the Mad Blood Demon appeared next and attacked the village. Since the trainees feared they couldn't defeat such a monster, Raon became the bait to keep it occupied. Hearing this, one of the direct bloodline heirs stood up and protested, refusing to believe Raon's words. He even tried to sway the head of the family against him. Yet Raon remained composed and calmly instructed Dorian to present evidence, the severed heads of both the Green War Demon and the Mad Blood Demon. He also asked permission to draw his sword, revealing the aura of a sword expert. The hall fell into shock at both the monster heads and Raon's aura. One by one, people began to accept Raon's words. Then Raon asked, "Is this proof enough?" The one who had been protesting earlier was left seething with frustration. Afterward, the head of the family announced that all the trainees had performed their mission excellently. Each would receive a bronze medal, except for Raon, who would be awarded a silver medal. However, that was the only reward given. Raon felt a bit disappointed, as he had hoped for something more. But just as he was about to leave, the family head's assistant stopped him. He whispered that the head wanted to see Raon later that night, suggesting there was a second reward waiting for him. After that, Raon returned home. His mother and the servants greeted him warmly, worried about his condition after fighting against Eden. His mother even apologized for the words she had spoken before he left. But Raon told her there was no need to apologize, because thanks to her words, he was able to stand tall as a true swordsman in front of an overwhelming enemy. Hearing this, his mother broke into tears. Afterward, Raon went into his room. There, Judiel was waiting to report that the Central Martial Hall seemed ready to discard her. Hearing this, Raon quickly realized it was likely because she hadn't reported that he had reached the level of sword expert, and so they had taken their anger out on her. Raon couldn't possibly allow them to throw away Judiel, the double agent he had worked so hard to protect. So he immediately ordered Judiel to report that she had now become Raon's personal maid, chosen directly by his mother. With that information, suspicion toward her would fade. Instead, they would believe Judiel to be even more useful for gathering deeper intelligence about Raon. Shocked by his instructions, Judiel hesitated, but Raon continued. If they still suspected her, then she should report that Raon had already recovered, and that only the family head and Rimmer were aware of this truth. That way, they would surely consider Judiel too valuable to abandon. Raon then ordered her to send the message right away, and reminded her to keep her expression under control so no one would suspect anything. After Judiel left, the Wrath Spirit appeared and mocked Raon, saying it was pathetic to protect a useless spy. Raon responded that Judiel was actually a valuable piece on the board, one he could use to strike Karin Sieghart from behind. Besides, Raon saw her as no different from his former self, someone used and discarded when no longer needed. Later that night, Raon went to meet the family head, as instructed by his assistant. The head wasted no time, and went straight to the point. He asked Raon which technique he used most often during missions. Raon was a bit surprised by the question, but answered honestly that he usually relied on river footwork, the basic movement technique taught during training. The family head acknowledged that while river footwork was solid and useful, even at higher levels, it was too simple and became ineffective against stronger opponents. That was why he intended to gift Raon with a new movement technique, one that suited him perfectly, and more than that, he would personally teach it to Raon. Raon was stunned. He could hardly believe the strongest warrior on the continent was about to demonstrate something just for him. The head prepared himself and told Raon to watch carefully, as he would only perform the technique once. Witnessing the movements of the continent's strongest warrior was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Raon was utterly shocked, unable to move, as he watched. The technique was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was slow, yet fast, sharp yet flowing, vast and free, as if it could reach every corner of the continent. Even though Raon only caught a glimpse of it, the movement felt flawless, so perfect that even his ring of fire couldn't fully comprehend it. The technique was called Supreme Harmony Steps. Immediately after witnessing it, a notification appeared. Raon's ring of fire had managed to grasp the very first movement of the technique, called True Heaven. The head then asked Raon if he could perceive it. Raon admitted that the technique was far beyond his level, making it very difficult to fully understand, but he could still catch the first movement. Hearing this, the family head ended the meeting, telling Raon to leave for now. After Raon left, the family head's assistant admitted he never expected the head to personally pass down such a technique to Raon. He also expressed concern, since it was a technique personally created by the head himself, and incredibly difficult to master. The assistant then asked if Raon could truly learn it. The family head replied that since Raon had already grasped the first movement, which was essentially half of the technique, in such a short time, there was no doubt. Because the technique was built step by step, all starting from that first movement, Raon would gradually comprehend the essence behind it. One day, Raon would definitely be able to use it. Days passed, yet Raon still couldn't master the technique, not even with the system's help. When his mother caught him training, she scolded him harshly and ordered him to rest, especially since Raon had already promised her he would. In the end, Raon couldn't continue his training because his mother kept reprimanding him. He even tried to practice in secret, but that also failed, as the servants were constantly keeping watch over him. Then suddenly one of Raon's servants rushed in, clearly panicked. Breathlessly, he told Raon that they were in serious trouble. Raiden Sieghart, a direct descendant, had arrived at their residence. Raiden was none other than the son of Baldur Sieghart, the family head's fourth son. Shocked, Raon asked why Raiden had come to their home. The servant admitted he didn't know, but at that very moment, Raiden was harming Raon's mother and the other servants. Raon was stunned. The scene then shifted to Raon's mother, who was face to face with Raiden. Raiden insulted her garden, furious that he hadn't been properly welcomed. He demanded to know if she had never received his letter announcing his visit. Raon's mother calmly replied that no such letter had ever reached her. Even after she said this, Raiden insisted he had sent it. Raon's mother and the servants quickly rushed to clean the garden, asking him to wait a little while longer. But this only angered Raiden more. He despised everything about the situation. He fumed, thinking that after destroying the White Blood Branch sect, all the family's attention should have been on him. Yet instead, all the recognition had gone to Raon, and his own achievements were being overlooked. Unable to bear it, Raiden spat on Raon's mother in rage. Seeing this, one of Raon's servants couldn't stand by and tried to intervene. But it was useless. Raiden struck him down effortlessly, even kicking him while he was on the ground. Right then, Raon arrived, carrying his sword. With arrogance, Raiden provoked him, declaring himself a direct descendant and demanding Raon put his weapon away before things got out of hand. But Raon didn't care in the slightest. He immediately pointed his blade at Raiden's neck. Fortunately, Raiden's attendant stepped in to block the strike. Otherwise, Raon might have killed him on the spot and ended up in serious trouble. Still burning with anger, Raon struck Raiden's attendant instead. Furious, Raiden shouted at Raon, demanding how dare he point a sword at him. Raon calmly retorted that he was simply driving out a thug who had barged into his home without permission. Raiden was shocked by his words and snapped back, claiming he was the rightful master of this family, but Raon denied it flatly, saying Raiden was no master of theirs, then kicked him down. He declared that this house belonged to his family and prepared to strike Raiden once more. Before Raon's sword could land, however, someone appeared and ordered him to stop. It was a member of the Heavenly Sword Order, a swordsman directly serving under the family head, named Raphael. Seeing Raphael, Raiden immediately demanded he kill Raon, accusing him of daring to attack a direct descendant. But Raphael calmly stated that he only obeyed orders from the family head himself. He then advised Raiden to stand down. Even Raiden's own attendant urged him to retreat, warning that if he didn't, the matter would spiral out of control. Begrudgingly, Raiden had no choice but to leave for now. But before departing, he swore to Raon that he would exact vengeance worse than death itself. After Raiden left, one of Raon's servants apologized to his mother, blaming himself for being reckless and worsening the situation. But she reassured him, saying he had done nothing wrong and that she would handle things. Raon then stepped in, declaring that he would take care of everything himself. He admitted he had lost control of his emotions when Raiden provoked him, so it was only right that he be the one to settle it. Soon after, both Raon and Raiden were summoned to the family head's hall. There, Raiden claimed he had indeed sent a letter to Raon's household days before, but when he arrived, he wasn't welcomed properly. He also accused Raon of attacking both him and his attendant, adding that if Raphael hadn't intervened, he might have been killed. Listening to Raiden's performance, Raon thought to himself that Raiden would make a far better actor than a swordsman, since everything he said was completely different from Judiel's report. Raon then addressed the family head, firmly denying Raiden's accusations, especially the claim about holding back. Enraged, Raiden grabbed Raikun by the collar, but before things escalated further, the family head's assistant spoke up, ordering them both to be silent. They were, after all, standing in front of the family head. Since the two sides' stories conflicted, the head immediately summoned Raphael, the witness to what had happened earlier. Raphael appeared and gave his account. He testified that when Raiden had suddenly arrived at Raon's residence, no letter had ever been delivered, and Raon's mother had simply been tending the garden with her servants. Hearing this, Raon was slightly surprised. He hadn't expected Raphael to go against a direct descendant like Raiden, and instead tell the truth of the situation. Meanwhile, the family head grew slightly angry, as Raiden's story clearly didn't match the truth. Even after being caught lying, Raiden stubbornly insisted that wasn't the main issue. To him, the real problem was that a child from a branch family had dared to raise his sword against a direct descendant like himself, something that could shatter the family hierarchy. The family head acknowledged that such behavior indeed couldn't be excused. However, in his eyes, both sides had caused trouble. Therefore, he would hand down appropriate punishments to each of them. Even after hearing this, Raiden refused to accept it and shouted that Raon should be executed. Raon, however, calmly stated that he would accept any punishment. But before that, there was one thing he wished to do. The family head asked what it was. Raon explained that Raiden had insulted his family and even attacked his servants, and Raon had yet to repay those actions. The family head grew irritated, since he had already declared them both at fault. But Raon reminded him of his own words, that for a swordsman, pride is carried in their blade. Therefore, Raon requested permission to settle things through a duel with Raiden. Intrigued, the family head agreed without hesitation. The duel would take place 1 week later in the Grand Training Hall. Afterward, Raiden went to report to his father about the duel. The stakes were clear. If Raiden won, he would destroy Raon's energy center. But if Raon won, Raiden and his servant would have to apologize to Raon's family. And even the true Martial Hall would be forced to distance itself from them. Raiden's father sneered, saying that although Raon was talented, he was still trash. After all, he was Sylvia's son. He ordered Raiden to show Raon the true meaning of being a direct descendant. Raiden reassured his father there was nothing to worry about. Last time, he hadn't been armed and had been caught off guard. But this time, defeat was impossible. After all, he was already at the mid-sword expert level. His father then gave one final command, to make sure Raon could never use his hands again after the duel, so that all of Raon's hopes would be crushed. On the other side, Raon began training in preparation for the duel. His mother and the servants could only watch with worry. One of the servants asked her if they were really just going to stand by and do nothing. After all, Raiden was a mid-level sword expert, and it would be better to stop the duel entirely. Raon's mother also felt that the duel was extremely dangerous, especially since Raiden's skill in the flexible swordsmanship was impressive, having been taught directly by his father, Baldur. But the look in Raon's eyes when he asked them to trust him, that gaze made her decide not to interfere. Instead, she chose to believe in her son to handle the situation himself. In truth, she was trembling with fear and worry, but seeing Raon's confidence made her realize they needed to place their trust in him. Soon after, Judiel arrived, bringing Raon his lunch. Along with the meal, she also handed him a book, a detailed and well-organized record of Raiden's flexible swordsmanship. On top of that, Judiel had already risked herself earlier to protect his mother. Raon felt deeply grateful toward her. Time passed quickly. The two of them spent the week in their own ways, Raon training diligently, while Raiden relaxed without a care, fully confident that victory was already his. Finally, the day of the duel arrived. Raiden could barely contain his eagerness to crush Raon. In fact, he was already fantasizing about cutting off Raon's arm, ensuring his future as a swordsman would be destroyed forever. Once both were ready, the duel began. Raiden charged forward first, aiming his strike at Raon, but his attack completely missed. Raon had vanished from his sight. The next moment, Raon was already behind him, pressing his sword to Raiden's neck. Calmly, Raon declared that this was Raiden's first death. He added that Raiden would die 8 times today, before slamming his fist into Raiden's back. The blow sent Raiden staggering, leaving him stunned and wondering what on earth was happening. He couldn't see Raon's movements at all. Raon then ordered him to get up, saying Raiden still hadn't died 8 times yet. Infuriated, Raiden rushed to attack again, but once more, none of his strikes landed. Raon appeared behind him again, launching another attack. As he struck Raiden, Raon coldly stated that each blow was payback for his past sins against Raon's family, from spitting on his mother to kicking his servants. Then Raon continued, striking Raiden again and again. Raiden was helpless. He couldn't counterattack, nor could he even evade Raon's strikes. All he could do was take the beating, bewildered at how Raon, whose level was supposed to be lower than his, was overwhelming him so easily. Meanwhile, Raon's mother and the servants were stunned. By now, Raon could have ended the duel with his very first attack, but instead, he was dragging it out. The servant realized that Raon was deliberately avenging every wrong their family had suffered at Raiden's hands. The servant was deeply moved, unable to believe that his young master would go this far for the sake of a mere servant like him. In this household, bloodline meant everything, yet Raon was daring to defy that hierarchy. Raon's mother, too, was overwhelmed with emotion, watching her son fight not just for himself, but for their family. The Zigguhart family had long pursued only strength, growing ever colder and more merciless. Even though she herself was of the direct bloodline, she had always felt like an outsider. That was why she had run away before, unable to endure it, choosing instead a harsher life. Now she regretted that decision. She should never have abandoned her place back then. But in this moment, Raon was proving something to her. Even if someone is weak, as long as they possess an unyielding heart, no one can look down on them if they fight to the very end. And so, Raiden continued to be pummeled relentlessly, until at last, Raon was declared the victor of the duel. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.